Hey, all set.
Hey.
My other phone didn't adjust the volume. I just put it on silent.
Yeah, well, I think there's a way to do that.
Maybe it's this talking. Oh, that top little side went down, shows ready.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I will call this meeting to order at 1:04 p.m. and start in a good way by acknowledging with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. These people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding the Hualaham Bowen Island. Welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality meeting of December 11th, 2023, and thank you for joining. I'm Andrew Leonard, the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the chair of this meeting. I'd like to introduce the other elected members of Bowen's Council here this afternoon, starting on my right. We have Councillor Sue Ellen Fast, an Islands trustee. Councillor and Islands trustee Judy Getty. To my far left, Councillor John Saunders. To his right, Councillor Tim Wake. And to his right, Councillor Allison Morse. Also joining us online today is Councillor Alex Jurgensen. We're also joined by several members of our professional staff team here today, including our Chief Administrative Officer, Liam Edwards, our Corporate Officer, Sophia Tsinga, as well as other members of our staff who may be presenting reports and information to Council here today. This meeting is being recorded, so when members of the public speak during the public comment and question and answer portion of the meeting, your presence and voice will be included in the permanent recording, which is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca, as well as streaming on our YouTube channel right now. This council meeting is an official forum for the conducting of the business of local government. We all love our home. We are all passionate about what happens in this community. And I'd encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting and to direct comments to Mayor and Council during the public comment or question and answer portions of the meeting to myself. For those following along, either online or in here in the room, if you don't have it already, the agenda and full package for this afternoon's meeting is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca. And with that, I will look to the corporate officer for the addition of any late items to the agenda.
There are three items this morning. 7.2 and 7.3 were amended attachments to the staff reports, and those were circulated by email. And then item 8.3, there is a correction to the permit number. The correct permit number is TUP 022019.
Sorry, which number was that?
That's 8.3.
8.3, thank you.
Okay, and with that, I will look for an adoption of the agenda and late items. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Wake. Discussion. Call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
And that carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to public comments. I'll look to the corporate officer for how many public comments we have today.
We have 5 today.
5. Okay, so each commenter will have the full 3 minutes to speak. You will hear a timer if you're in the room or here online. We'll set it for 2 minutes and 45 seconds. So when you hear that timer, you've got 15 seconds left to wrap up your comments for council and asks that you have of us. And with that, I will look for our first commenter.
First today is Gurinder Singh Man.
Interesting, man. Yep, feel free to come on up. You can take all the time you want to get settled and relaxed. The timer doesn't start until you start.
I thought you have to bolt to the front, you know.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Thank you very much. I'm ready to begin.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sure. So I'm the owner of the property for 8.2 or 211 Island Trail for the DBP. So I just wanted to introduce myself, let everyone know. So when we bought the property, the sheds were already there. And we've been trying to work with the municipality, the planning department to understand what changes need to be done. I wasn't aware that there were any, but when it's brought to our attention, we want to be compliant. So on our part, we've hired an architect. I'll give a little bit of idea. Until you're not actually on the property, it's kind of a little bit, it can look a little bit less steep. So on the west side, it's basically a cliff at some points where it just drops right off. And the east side, where we have a little bit of flat land, and then that's where we have the sheds. So early on, in late August actually, I went there to get a contractor, kind of take a look what I would need to move it. To give an example, and I ended up falling. Broke my ankle inside and outside. Yeah, I had to go for surgery. So that's how steep the slope is on the property. It's not exactly easy. So from our side, I think all I'm trying to say is we just need it for basic outside storage. And, you know, if you have any questions, I'm here, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ellen Hayakawa.
Ms. Hayakawa, are you online or in the room?
I don't see her online. So maybe we
We
will,
can hold on until we can move her till the end and
yeah.
do another
we'll
call.
Move on to Cameron Rolfe, who is on Zoom.
Gerald, are you there?
Hi, Mayor and Council.
Hi, we can see you and hear you. You're coming through loud and clear.
Excellent. Thanks for listening to me today. I recently conducted a poll on Facebook entitled, "Is Now the Right Time for a Tiny Home Village on Bowen Island?" Some of you may have seen it. 397 people responded to the poll, and it generated 277 comments. I want to share some of the data with you, or some of the information today. The biggest question would you like to see a tiny home village established on Bowen Island? Surprisingly, 76% of respondents voted in favor of that. 21% responded maybe, and 3% said no. The poll went on to say, if maybe, what would that depend on? And some of the answers were it being well managed, if it was truly affordable, need a way to ensure priority to existing Bowen residents, must be affordable, location, access to services, etc. The next question was, do you know any Bowen Islanders that may benefit from affordable housing in a tiny home village? You can choose more than one answer. The answers were yes, dozens, yes, a few, maybe one or two, yes, me, or no, none. And the lead response was yes, a few at 43%. And if you combined yes, a few with yes, dozens, in other words, who thinks they know at least a few people that can benefit from this, that's 80% of respondents. Went on, question 4 is, do you think Bowen business could benefit from additional affordable housing for staff? You could choose more than one response. The overwhelming answer was 96% voted yes. Voted yes, many. Answer 2 was yes, my business, or the third answer was no. And like I said, 96% think yes, many businesses could benefit from this. Maybe the most surprising results were question 5, where should a tiny home village be located? The answers were anywhere, or in or close to the cove only, or on acreage property outside the cove. And to my surprise, 52% thought these should be located anywhere, 27% on acreage property outside the cove. 27% thought on acreage property outside the cove, and only 18% thought that it should be in or close to the cove only. 3.6% voted for none of the above. Question 6 was, in your mind, what are the most important benefits to a tiny home village that a tiny home village may provide? And the choices were providing long-term affordable housing, adding to the diversity of housing stock, creation of a neighborhood community, sustainability, or none of the above. And providing long-term affordable housing won the day with 88.7%. respondents were asked if they'd like to comment beyond that. And some of the comments were keeping the economy healthy on Bowen for businesses who need staff and young laborers. This is desperately needed, long overdue, and progressive way to provide housing security, a place for the young. This is desperately overdue. Please, let's do this ASAP. The most important thing is for it to be for Islanders.
Mr. Rolfe, I'm going to jump in here just because you are over time. Okay. It does sound like a fascinating survey. Would you be able to email the results to Mayor and Council, as I know that many of us would probably like to look at those results and digest them ourselves. And I know that you've met with some members of Council, and I can chat with you offline about it as well.
I'd be happy to do that. Thanks for taking the time. Sorry, I did not hear the gong.
No, thank you, Mr. Rolfe.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jay Mather.
Mather, come on up. Hello.
So I'm coming today to talk about 211 Highland Trail, Gurinder application, because I'm one of his neighbors. And I wanted to voice my support for the amendments because these buildings have been there for at least 7 years, serving no damage to anybody. And it seems kind of strange that existing structures that were there before someone buys a dwelling are suddenly potentially burdened with demolition. That's the point of the previous owner. That's the point of the building permits at the beginning of the process. Burdening someone who moves into a house later with something that should have been caught before seems a bit imbalanced. And also basing things on sustainability. Why are we destroying potentially buildings for no purpose? It just doesn't make any sense. So I just wanted to voice that and say that we love the sheds. They inspire us.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Mather.
Cheers.
Appropriate to ask questions, comment, or
just yes. So just to clarify, so in public comments, it can be questions only. There's no comments or responses to the council.
so quick question through the mayor. Rich, you said you're a neighbor. Are you on the shed side or elsewhere?
I believe I'm on the shed side, yeah.
So you're the one that's right up against
One over.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next, we have Anne-Franck Derrier.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Your Worship, ladies and gentlemen of the council. I want to bring to your attention and to that of the designing engineers the actual depth of the groundwater at the location of the proposed on-island composting facility. The concern being that there may be potential for groundwater pollution from the facility that may impact an important receptor, Terminal Creek. All Bowen Islanders are invited every first Sunday in June to the Coho Bon Voyage event. It is the release of coho fry into Terminal Creek. The fry then spend up to a year in the creek before becoming smolt and to swim to Manion Bay and to start the ocean journey. So it is paramount that the Terminal Creek and the stormwater surface runoff and groundwater feeding Terminal Creek be free of any undesirable pollution. Bowen Island, walking the meadows in the winter, are well aware of the shallow groundwater saturating its soil as it is a marshy area. The plant facility sits less than 200 meters from Terminal Creek. The primary design presented for the project gives a detailed description of the plant facility, the mechanics of the facility. But I see a weakness in its environmental and climate consideration. I quote, "An operating plan addressing odor, groundwater, stormwater, and vector management will be prepared as part of permitting process. The facility goes above and beyond best general practice for these factors, and it is not anticipated to generate any significant impact to the environment. While figure 4, page 4, 3D rendering of the earth flow and systems inside the building. Note that the piping is installed below ground. Great attention will have to be taken considering the presence of the groundwater at the site, especially temporal, shallow perched water table when designing the storm surface water and leachate collection. No collecting basin can be allowed to overflow into the groundwater. And I repeat, no collecting basin can be allowed to overflow into the groundwater because of its proximity to Terminal Creek and its potential effect on the health of Terminal Creek and its inhabitants. It will be necessary to check the health of the groundwater at regular interval by monitoring the water quality just outside the plant facility, which includes sampling and analysis. A sample taken before starting the facility would give a baseline that can be checked against at regular interval. Thank you.
So cool. Thank you very much.
And I haven't seen Ellen Hayakawa arrive on Zoom or in person, so maybe she withdrawn her registration.
Okay. So that concludes the public comments. Thank you to our commenters for being here today and showing up to council and being heard. It's appreciated whether you're in the room or online. Anyone is welcome to appear in front of us. Moving on to the next item on our agenda is delegations. 3.1, we have William Schulba, Islands Trust, regarding house sound aquifer conceptualization and groundwater recharge mapping. Feel free to come on up and join us here at the table.
What? I didn't recognize you with your beard. Excuse me. Hi, William.
Hello. So thank you, council, local staff, and special hello to trustees Bast and Getty. Nice to see you. I'm providing a delegation, which is a PowerPoint presentation that is in your agenda package on page 10.
Would you like me to share that as you go?
You can. I'm looking at the same agenda package, so I can tell you to forward it when you did. So it's my understanding, Mayor, that I have a 15-minute delegation.
Yes, 15 minutes.
I'm going to try to make it 10, and can I take questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So pardon me if I am swift through this, because I'd like to hear from council as much as you may want to hear from me. So thank you. I'm William Schulba. I'm Senior Freshwater Specialist at the Islands Trust. My profession is I'm a professional geoscientist with specific expertise in groundwater hydrology and hydrogeology and watershed geoscience. And so this presentation here is part of a larger freshwater sustainability strategy of the Islands Trust, in particular the Groundwater Sustainability Science Program. Within this program, we have identified groundwater recharge potential across the Islands Trust area, including Bowen Island and islands in the Howe Sound. And I'm presenting on this today. If we can please move to the next slide. This is a really brief presentation because it's a delegation. And so there will be 2 webinars that will be coming up in the new year, which will outline the freshwater sustainability strategy and our online freshwater atlas, which is in beta testing right now. And so that will be available at the end of our fiscal year is when it's going to be out of beta and ready for public consumption. So there'll be a presentation on that. And then the second webinar, which the dates are to be determined, I think they settled on one now, but it's in February. And I'll be discussing more on this groundwater work in general context. So, but we'll be getting more into the methodology of it. So if you're interested in the methods on how we determine groundwater recharge on Bowen Island, then it will be described at that time. Next slide, please. Through the development of the freshwater sustainability strategy, we engage deeply with cultural knowledge holders and including knowledge holders from Squamish First Nation, and there's this beautiful film that was created for that project, and it's called What Water Tells Us, and it's on the Islands Trust website under, I can send the links around after, but it's under the freshwater programs section. It's quite easy to find on our website. Next slide, please. Groundwater on these islands is a unique amenity. It's unique to all the other places in Canada where I've worked on groundwater. All the groundwater in Bowen comes from meteoric water, which means it comes from rain and fog and snow that falls directly on the island. There's no off-island imports of water except those that come on barges on ferries. The surrounding mountains don't provide freshwater resources to Bowen Island, and that makes groundwater resources on islands quite unique and needs special consideration, especially in the protection of the recharge areas where groundwater will fall on the island and enter into the groundwater system. Next slide, please. Pretty good. So I will be talking in brief about the Aquifer Conceptualization Project. So this is a project in which we studied all the available data to us. So this is including our wells registry from the province, geological mapping, soils mapping, topography, and we created a three-dimensional hydrogeologic model of Bowen Island in which it will be open to the public, and the public can slice it and look at the different layers within Bowen, which is not as complex as the Southern Gulf Islands, because this is more of a like hard rock dominated island compared to the softer rock islands in the south. Next slide, please. So what is an aquifer? An aquifer is a subterranean geological unit that can store and transmit water in quantities that are useful for domestic, industrial, and ecological uses. So we don't really have traditional aquifers on the islands. The whole island is considered an aquifer except for smaller pocket aquifers that are sand and gravel. But the fractured bedrock aquifer generally acts as one giant basin. And so that's another uniqueness compared to, say, the lower mainland. Next slide, please. So through this project, we looked at groundwater wells density on the island. So this map here shows where the wells are on the island. They're the white dots that are registered in the groundwater wells registry. And there are areas of the island where there's greater than 50 wells per square kilometer, which is we consider very high density, and where you don't see any color, that's very low density. And the reason why I bring up this map here is when we determine groundwater recharge mapping, the next step is to determine water balance. So how much water comes into the island, how much is available for ecological use and for human use, and then to forecast into the future how that's going to change in a changing climate and also in build out. And forgive me, the Islands Trust does not do land use planning for Bowen, so I'm not too familiar with your build out plans, but in some of the other islands, there's some significant build out potential that can increase the amount of water demand needed to realize those official community plans. Next slide, please. I was going to provide a demo of the 3D model. I won't do that here. Once because it was also breaking down in beta. So once the demo, or once the 3D model is ready for public consumption, there will be a dedicated link for Bowen Island in particular. And this is kind of like a living model that will be continuously added once we get new information. It shows the structure of the bedrock underground, as well as a really nice view of the topography. All the wells are located in there, including the well depths. And also we have been determining the fracture depths of some of the wells to have a tool for consultants and residents to predict perhaps where they would strike water if they were to drill a new well, which is quite exciting. Go ahead. I'm getting close to here. Next slide, please. So I want to discuss the groundwater recharge mapping project. This is the seminal project of this program. Over 4 years, we have mapped out 500 square kilometers of groundwater recharge potential, which is a novel undertaking. Next slide, please. We're kind of expanding on our conceptual models that we started way back in the day with the Waterscape model, and here's one of this is a cross section of Bowen Island, and I would like you to maybe just focus on Josephine Lake, which I use Josephine Lake an example on all of my presentations, including when I teach in undergraduate studies, that these high elevation lakes and wetlands are so important to groundwater resources. They act as a local discharge area. So these lakes locally catch water from the hill slope, and since they're elevated over time, they contribute greatly to the recharge of the island. And like these are the special places on the island. And after the meeting here, my co-op student behind me, Jiming Sun, we're going to go to several areas of the island where there's high groundwater recharge potential that we mapped, and do some ground truthing. And one of the places we're going to head is in the area of Josephine Lake. So I'm quite excited for that. I can spend an hour on this slide right here, so I will move on. Next slide, please. One of the unique parts of the method that we undertook is that we considered the role of ecosystems. So we used the vegetation resource inventory and determined how much the ecosystems intercept the water from precipitation and just put it back out into the sky, and it doesn't contribute to groundwater recharge on the island. And we also considered how much the ecosystems will funnel into the ground through stem flow, as well as the role of a healthy forest floor in sustaining groundwater recharge over a longer period of time. And next slide, please. This is what the data looks like. It looks quite complex, I know. The darker blue areas are the areas of the highest recharge, and the lighter blue areas are moderate recharge, and the rest of the landscape is either none through flow or actual discharge area where water is coming out of the ground rather than going into the ground. And here you can see I highlighted Josephine Lake on the right there. If your eyes are attracted to these long blue lines, those are the geological contacts of the island, or lineaments as we call them. So they can either be faults or areas where two pieces of geology come together, or for some reason it's a steep gully, which is which supports groundwater recharge more than the rest of the landscape. And next slide, please. So indeed, we need to protect groundwater recharge areas in the way that we can to preserve the health of the aquifer. This is not only providing essential water resources to groundwater wells, but also this is indeed supporting ecosystems. There's many groundwater dependent ecosystems on the island, such as wetlands and receiving creeks that require groundwater to continue their health and providing the ecological services on island as well as offshore as well. And I have next slide, please. So yeah, healthy watersheds helps groundwater recharge. And in this case here, we have a tree on a sponge. And if you imagine a dry sponge, try to pour water on it and the water just rolls off, but a wet sponge will hold on to water a little bit easier. So healthy, thirsty, moist forest supports groundwater recharge. And next slide, please. So next step for freshwater sustainability planning is can provide all of this data to Bowen Island Municipality. It's potential that Island Trust could be an external partner on collaborating with protecting recharge areas, either through development permit areas or elsewise, determining water balance. It's a hot topic at Trust Council right now, looking at water balance of our islands. All the provincial water allocation plans need to be updated, so that goes to coordinating with partners, and all of this doesn't make sense without deep coordination with our First Nation partners. And next slide, please. This is just a beautiful drawing that was created by our traditional knowledge holders during the freshwater sustainability strategy development. And so Trustee Fass, the strategic roundtable for That development? No, sorry. Oh no, it's our other house sound partners on.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. And so that is all. I think I took up most of my 15 minutes. I'm sorry, but I'm open for questions. Thanks.
No problem. Council for any questions or comments? Council Fast, Council Giddy.
Thanks very much, William. I haven't, or I should say, Freshwater Williams, I'll call you. I haven't seen freshwater, oh gosh, freshwater shoulder, I think is what I used to call you, yes. I haven't been involved with this project for a couple of years now, and it's exciting to see this come to Bowen. I'm interested in the 3D mapping, in the 3D modeling, sorry, but did it look like you were using the new batch of LiDAR in
Yes.
there? Because that, okay,
Yeah.
great, because I haven't seen that before. And can you tell me more about the modeling of depth, predictions for wells?
Sure, yeah, so there's the Groundwater Wells Registry, which is a collection of drill records from drillers, and historically they weren't mandated to provide them, now they are after the Water Sustainability Act. And the province has done a good job of trying to get the old records. And so they're in a database, and our consultant used machine learning to look at the drill records, like I think we looked at almost 10,000 records across the Islands Trust area, and associated drilling notes to actual geologic units, and also used machine learning to look at the depth of the wells and also where there's water strikes. So if you've ever been on a well drilling project on the island, you know that when the driller's drilling, it's dry, and then boom, you strike water, and it's hallelujah, strike water. And so that depth is usually noted. And so that noted depth of the bottom of the well as well as the fracture has been inputted into the 3D model. And so our next step is to try to identify areas where the depth of a certain area can provide water, and also in areas like on Salt Spring Island where arsenic is an issue, looking at particular depths of fractures to see if we can correlate them to issues with arsenic and other issues to maybe avoid during drilling, or at least provide that data to the consultant or to the applicant.
Thank you very much. Yeah, arsenic's an issue with Poland as well. So thank you, that's great.
Council Fast, Council Giddy.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
I've had a chance before. And your second to last slide, with respect to the next steps for freshwater sustainability, there's a chart on the bottom left. The rooftop catchment is particularly low. And I'm wondering if that is overall household use, or people that have catchment tanks that maybe use them in the garden, but they're not hooked up to anything inside.
Yeah, thank you. This was kind of like I cast a line to fish some questions from this, because this is from the Waterscape project, which I believe was in the early 2000s, late 90s.
Correct.
Yeah, that's kind of like the motif of.
Did you engage with Bob Turner?
I did not, which would be, yeah, that's actually, I will, that's a good idea. And these numbers are from that. So I'm not sure, it's likely that on Bowen, the rooftop catchment has increased, but I believe that this is rooftop catchment to storage, yeah. That's the still number.
I'm going to go in order. Councillor Fast, Councillor Wick.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shuba. My questions are around rainwater catchment as well. It seems pretty clear that it's going to be a big part of our future planning with climate change and everything. I'm just wondering if you're aware of communities that have taken a lead in creating more rooftop capture.
Yes, I am. The Regional District of Nanaimo has a drinking water and watershed protection program. And there they have rebate incentives, and they have many electoral areas, of course, in the entire region there. And the one electoral area that consistently uses up all of their allotment of their rebates is Gabriel Island. And I'm on their technical advisory committee for the district for this program. And they just announced that they rolled over 1 million gallons of storage since they rolled out the program 10 years ago. So that's quite significant. And their program is, I think it costs a landholder $14 a year on their tax assessment. And some of these rebates are several $100s. So if there's a landowner that engages in the rebate program, it essentially pays for their program costs for a decade or so. But yeah, they've really pushed the envelope on engaging citizens in that way. And on Salt Spring Island, we had a slight win. It's an odd one. Since the majority of the 5,000 gallon tanks, which are sold on Salt Spring as a standard rainwater capture tank, is over 4 feet, it was considered a structure from the regional district. So then you needed a building permit, and also because you needed a building permit, you needed an engineer to engineer the footing that the tank went on. So there was several of us came together to stop doing this. And so they came together and building inspection or whatever that group is, got an engineering spec drawing. So an installer, like someone who has an excavator or something, can come and install the tank to spec, and you don't have to go through this arduous engineering building process. And so that's a win too. Yeah.
One short follow-up, if I may. So would it be correct in assuming that most of that rainwater capture goes to watering gardens and outdoor use?
I think most of it is for, like low risk, non-potable,
Right.
sometimes maybe not even edible gardening, like to support landscaping. I have seen some very fancy rainwater harvesting systems that support an entire house solely, and the basement is filled with 4 feet of water or something like that, and it's really exciting. So I think that there's a wide variety of opportunity to use that water. By far and away, agriculture is the largest user of water on these islands, and so any chance to augment watering from groundwater is helpful. And most plants like an acidic environment rather than a basic one, and groundwater is usually alkaline and basic, so rainwater is a better water source for that type of watering. So, thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Councillor Wake. We have a question from our CAO, then Councillor Fast, Councillor Getty, and that will be it.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for this presentation. It's great. I would love to spend hours on it with you.
Sure.
But
book a meeting.
curious if you consulted our DPAs that we have established here on Bowen. So we've got quite an extensive and robust DPA network, including aquifer recharge areas. And I'm not sure if you went in your research on Bowen.
I did look a bit at the development permit areas on Bowen, and I did knock on the virtual door of your island planner before I came here, so I didn't make a fool of myself. And so it seems like there is a movement for protection of recharge areas on the island. And so it would be interesting to do a overlay or an analysis using this new mapping with the existing development permit area. And precisely we did that on Galiano Island. Galiano Island had an elevated groundwater catchment area development permit area, which it was a good idea. But then the trustees of the day changed it, so it rendered it useless. Like within 10 years, there was not an application within the zone because most of the development permit was in protected lands already. And so through this mapping, we determined a new method to looking at development permit areas, which was by parcel, and to see how much, not a percentage area per parcel, because then that benefited large parcels and punished smaller parcels by having a percentage of groundwater recharge on a parcel. So we chose some breakpoints of how much area would a parcel be included in the DPA. And their options were 2 hectares, 5 hectares, and 10 hectares of recharge, critical recharge areas, so the highest, most critical recharge potential on a particular parcel. And they chose 5 hectares. So that automatically excluded all of the parcels that were less than 5 hectares. And so most of the large privately managed forest lands were in the DPA. And so that was an interesting update to their development permit area. And right now they're going through First Nation consultation on, it hasn't got first reading, but we're in referral stage right now.
Right, yeah, we don't question the parcel size, this is the DPA, you're in or you're out. And whether it's like a fraction of the parcel or not.
Yeah, and so a lot of our DPAs that are like nature-based DPAs, I'll call this nature-based DPA, is like say steep slopes, and there will be like polygons of DPA everywhere. And we just didn't find that necessary for the recharge area just because of the nature of the data. So in that case, we just created a methodology that a parcel's either in or out of the DPA. And so it was interesting to see the breakpoint on affected parcels versus how much recharge would be protected. And we just found the sweet spot on how like not impacting all the parcels on the island, because that only gave us another 10%. Protecting only half the parcels of the island gave us 75% of the recharge. So on Galiano, that method worked really well. And so I'm happy to share that with you and your staff on that process.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. So Councillor Fast, Councillor Getty, we're in the second round. We're behind schedule, so
Yeah, thank you. Quick question. I'm really happy to hear about all the machine learning and the different kinds of ways you're using to assemble and analyze all the data. I think that's terrific. And it's amazing you've been able to gather it all, frankly, I think, from looking at the well data myself years ago. I'm wondering if this is all about supply, and I agree that's huge issue. What about quality? I'm wondering about the forever chemicals and pharmaceuticals and petrochemicals and things that might be collecting in the aquifers. Are you doing any kind of baseline on that, or is that part of a different project to be in the future?
Yeah, so the majority of the work, because as you know, I'm a one-person show in this game, so in the Island Trust, so the majority of our work is desktop analysis. Again, the Regional District of Nanaimo is looking at forever chemicals, and they've done a lot of sampling in the Englishman River, looking at groundwater wells and also surface water wells. And so we're all idly by like seeing what's going to happen with that, because it might be a good pilot and maybe an alarm bell, I'm not sure. But that being said, you said you have arsenic issues on the island. There's also like locked away salt water that was probably deposited at the last glaciation. And we notice when there's a new development, new subdivision, and more wells go in, that it starts to starts to migrate waters that have been stagnant in the past. And so we've seen on Main Island, there's been wells that have showed high levels of salinity in the middle of the island. And over the course of pumping, this was before the groundwater sustainability or groundwater protection regulation, where you couldn't pump a salty well, that it became fresher and started moving out that salt into the aquifer. And same with we've seen that with arsenic, where arsenic has been mobilized from a new development that has moved around arsenic in the area. So there has been some really good work on Hornby Island looking at chemistry, and what they've noticed is Diane Allen from Simon Fraser University, who's a professor, did the work there, and then the Hornby Water Stewardship redid the work 20 years later, and largely the actual chemistry stayed the same, and so that was unique. So I think that once the chemical nature of the island is determined, then it doesn't rapidly change, except when there's areas of really high time use changes.
Thank you.
In the interest of time, I'm going to save my question. I'll get in touch with you by sending an email.
Please do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, same with the rest of the council. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll share my email with you if you don't have it already.
That'd be great. Thank you for making the trip here, and
Thank you.
I hope you enjoy the sun here.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was in Vancouver yesterday and it was quite cloudy and I was a little bit sad, but
Much better day for
it's
students.
always sunny on Bowen, right?
We beg to differ in the winter.
I don't know what data you've been looking at.
Thanks again.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to the consent agenda, I will look to councillors if there's any items that you would like to pull from the consent agenda. Councillor Getty?
From the correspondence, please, 12.8, 12.15, and 12.30.
I was gonna pull 12.8.
Stuff as well, so it seems like a hot topic. Any other councillors wishing to pull items from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I will look for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Saunders. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Audio not unmuted.
Aye. That carries unanimously. Moving on to items from the consent agenda, 12.8, which is, I'm scroll down here. BC Ferries regarding Snug Cove project update dated November 28th, 2023. Councillor Getty.
So the letter that's attached to that talks about mitigation in terms of water taxi service, there's a shuttle service from Snug Cove to Adams Road, coincide with water taxi sailings. Can we, I'm not sure how this is going to be publicized, but it seems to me that this is coming up fairly quickly and the community needs to know what is going to be available and see whether or not they can supplement and add to that if needed in terms of figuring out, ride sharing and things. But I'm not sure that the letter and our list of correspondence is getting enough publicity for people to understand what is going to be available.
Right. Especially it's my understanding that when we're talking about berth closures on Saturday, January 20th, et cetera, that's the ferry gone for the day.
Yep.
Perhaps I'll look to staff to see, is there already a plan to communicate this to residents from our end, or is that something in direction from council?
I don't know that we have a.
If I may, our communications coordinator has been working with BC Ferries to repeat their messaging, but they are posting posters throughout the Cove, advertisements in the undercurrent. There is the project page on their website that actually lists under the FAQs, which I know is a little bit buried, but under the FAQs, there's a section there that lists the actual water taxi times and shuttle times, so that people can look at that and plan around it. And then in addition to that, BC Ferries is going to be posting, and I believe they already have posted quite a bit on social media, which we are sharing on our channels.
So we're sharing it and then it'll show up in our newsletters and?
Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
Are there any plans for parking on this side?
I
Increased
don't
parking?
know. We'd have to look at the,
Doesn't appear to be anything from BC Ferries, but is there any?
Nothing on our end.
Yeah, there's a link on the,
Sorry, but in their project page, they're indicating transit park and ride at 1421 Adams Road.
That's the fire hall.
Yeah.
And there's 4 spots in the park and ride.
Okay. And that's the extent of it at this point.
This is fire hall number 2.
Yeah.
Okay. So motion, Councillor.
Well, I guess it's a whole bit about how, I mean, Adams Road is fine, that's the number 2 fire hall, and it's, way down at the end of, just before you head to Bowen Bay. So presumably, what is the shuttle? How many people can it accommodate? Is it a bus? We don't know. And what about the rest of the island, like up between Charlotte Heights and Eagle Cliff and Hood Point and all that way. Are those people supposed to get home off the water tax? And I guess my other question, which we've never seen the actual run-by-run data, is a water taxi that holds one at 40, so 52 people, enough to pick up what would normally ride on those last ferries in the way of number of passengers and cars, you know, passengers and riders, and when the car even puts passengers. So, it just, you know, not gonna go anywhere where I have to come home on water taxi, I think, because I don't know that I'll get home.
Thank you. Motion to receive, or is there another disposition from council on this? That's good.
Motion to receive.
By Councillor Wake. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Next is 12.15. It is the Islands Trust regarding media monitoring report dated November 23rd, 2023. Councillor Getty.
So this is a letter from the trust saying that there's a licensing issue with respect to sharing all of the items that are included in their clippings, and that has been sorted out. But I'm wondering if we need to sort out if we republish in any way, because this one does not, but normally we repost what all their clipping service includes. Is it okay for us to do that?
I don't know that we do.
Oh, that would be.
It's just in the agenda, correct?
It's not even in the agenda. You have to sign up by email.
Okay, I get it as a trustee. And I thought it was a really good idea for this council and the community to also get it. And there was some question in terms of whether all of it was available or not. And some of it was by licensing agreement and some of it was more general. So I guess I'd like to follow up on this and see whether or not we can expand access to it, and who would I work with?
It's the Islands Trust media clippings, and so you'd have to work with them to understand what the realm of possibilities are. I know whenever I've received clippings, I'm not allowed to share them with anyone.
Okay.
And so it's usually restricted distribution.
That's been expanded according to this letter, but it raised a question in my mind in terms of whether or not we could expand that with our community. All right, and I will double check. And who is it? Corporate officer that's dealing with that, or Janet?
In terms of,
On our end?
Our end. If we wanted to publish this.
we have published it in the agenda. It is publicly available, the media monitoring report. So the community can read it there. It is not being published through our communications channels.
Okay.
Sorry, just to add to that, following the request from earlier in the year, we have worked with Claire Frater, Islands Trust, and she has, I believe they've expanded their license to be able to include staff and council members. So that should be coming shortly. Like, it was just a couple of weeks ago that I was communicating with her about providing email addresses, but that again is like a direct kind of recipient. They're sending it to, they've expanded their license to include Bowen Island municipality recipients.
And I think there needs to be clarification if it's okay to be sharing on a public agenda.
Yep.
I'm not.
Well, this version is.
This is just a letter explaining the restrictions. I had thought that we had in the past shared it.
No.
Public agenda.
That's
Never have.
Okay, we're starting to fuzz out a little bit
Okay, I'll
here.
follow up.
So I'm going to go to Councillor Fast.
Thank you. In this term and previous terms, I've offered to break the rules by forwarding them to other members of council, and nobody's taken me up on it. So in previous years either. I think I had one other counselor take me up on it, so I don't know how much interest there is out there for the record. Thank you.
So I'll look for a motion to receive 12.15. Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Fast. Call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And then 12.30, which is the Honorable Nathan Collin, Minister of Waterland and Resource Stewardship regarding UBCM follow-up. Councillor Getty.
So this is mine as well, and the attachments were not included in the agenda. And I thought that those were as important as the covering letter. We had received it earlier as a correspondence, and there are 2 attachments that are mentioned in the letter, but they didn't show up on the agenda, so.
So just a request.
If we could add them,
attach the agenda.
I would request that we add them.
Does that need a motion or is that?
Don't make
Just
do
do it.
that.
Okay, great. And a motion to receive, please. I moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Fast. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Audio not unmute. In favor.
Favor, then that carries unanimously. Thank you. That concludes the agenda. Now moving on to business arising from minutes, 6.1, phased implementation plan for Lot 1, scope of work for review. We have our manager of planning, Daniel Martin, here to discuss this item.
Yes.
Oh, and Mark from Tomo?
Yes.
Feel free to come on up. Come grab a seat.
Thank you.
There may be questions for you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mayor and Council. In October, Council directed staff to work with Birch and Tomo in their developing a scope of work and work plan for Lot 1 of the community land. So Birch and Tomo worked together. Staff had an initial meeting with them in devising their work plan, and that's what is before you on the agenda today. In essence, it's a plan for outlining development on Lot 1. The initial scope of work will be doing essentially a literature review, background check on all the existing plans, the existing zoning, doing some meetings with stakeholders, identifying gaps of what more information is needed, and checking back in with council at that point in the spring of 2024, next year, before moving on to work to generate preliminary concepts, do some feasibility testing on those concepts, and bringing those back to council in ideally June of 2024, so the week before that summer. And essentially doing more refining of those, outlining the actual implementation of itself, and that work to continue into the fall of 2024 before bringing final work to council end of next year. So that has been brought to council, looking for council endorsement, but knowing that there's a further check-in point anticipated in the spring. So Mark Shea of Tomo is here as well. If council has any specific questions about the implementation plan, I think we'll pass it over to him.
Questions? Councillor Saunders, then Councillor Fast.
Thank you. Thanks for putting this together. It looks pretty solid to me. Look, I wouldn't have any issue with it. The only thing I'd want to do is with under the scope of work where you've got the 25% optional check-in. I prefer that wasn't optional. Just a very brief, here's where we are at this point in time. But other than that, looks like a good plan to me. Thanks.
Councillor Fast.
Thank you. And apologies for walking around. It's just we're into the yellow for the ventilation. And I've come from a trust council meeting where a bunch of trustees came down with some of it COVID. I was wondering if we could add to scope, or do we need to add to scope, I guess is the question. The fact that Bowen Council passed this early adopter offsite housing wanted to join, be one of the early adopters in Metro Vancouver's plans. And I didn't see any reference to that, and I didn't see any reference to the various legislative and funding changes. I just wondered if, under scope, will you be following all that kind of stuff closely? Because I didn't see it there.
All right, I will jump in. Thank you, Councilor Fast. And thank you for the opportunity. I'm also joined here today by Robin Fenton from Birch, who's online. Councilor Fast, that was a very good suggestion. We make a point of including the changes that are upcoming on the provincial scale. We do have a place for sources of funding, and we'll be sure to add that in.
Okay, because just a quick follow-up, because I was in because we passed that, I joined a early adopter offsite housing dialogue webinar thingy on November 28th. And I was one of the only a few elected people in it. So I'm afraid Bowen got quite a bit of attention, but it could have been good attention because Lisa Helps, who's the head of BC Build in the Premier's office, was part of one of the breakout groups. And when I talked to her about Lot 1 and how you were coming to present this, staff had been directed to work with partners to bring forward this plan, she said, "How big is it?" And then she wrote it down. So I just wanted to let you know that Lisa Helps has written down something about Bowen Island's Lot 1, and she was delighted that it was over 20 acres. And Heather McNell of Metro Vancouver, head of planning, and also at the moment deputy CAO, I gather, mentioned Bowen as one of the early adopters already signed up. So it was a small dialogue session, small in terms of elected officials, so I'm afraid I got quite a bit of chance to talk. So I just want to make sure that the team knew that. And so you could follow up on those, let me know if you want more info. And thanks for your work. I've got more questions, but I'll let somebody else have the floor for a moment.
Thank you, Ms. Fast. Mr. Gilly?
Thank you for this. Well, generally overall, I like it. I think with respect to the scope of work number 3, checking with council at the 25%, that should not be optional. I think that it's something that we, the community, well, that's my next point, but if the community is getting the information through council and through the committee, then I think that we need to have as many forums as possible in terms of being able to explain what's going on. I'd also appreciate having a map in terms of understanding, and I think there's too many lot numbers and it's hard for me to understand where exactly all of this is. And I have to go back and reference some of the things that are, and I think we can make it easier for people to understand what it is that we're working on and talking about. Similarly with the scope of work number 7, it says this is after the 50% workshop. Checking in with stakeholders through a one-on-one and small group conversations plus online comment submission form bracket, but no official open houses because we're not BIM representative. And I think at some point, council has to decide in this process how and when to have an open session, whether it's probably a committee of the whole would work very well, but in terms of getting a lot of feedback from people, making sure that they understand what the process is and what the suggestions are going to be, which direction we're going in, and gets a lot of feedback from people in terms of whether or not we're going in the right direction and people are supporting it. So whether or not it's at the 50% mark or earlier, I don't have any preference, but I think that that's something that we have to consider as a council, that we open this up. And lastly, on deliverables, number 5, I have no idea what pro forma means. I would like some.
That's, I acknowledge the jargon, it's the financial numbers.
Okay.
The financial viability of whether.
I'll just put a $ sign beside it.
Dollar signs, yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mark, and to Robin as well for your efforts on this. Appreciate that, and to Planner Martin for his support. At some point, it would also be good to clarify what the stakeholder group looks like.
Okay.
Well, be quite curious as to who you're engaging and what that.
Just a couple of questions from here. Just for clarity, so this is to develop the development plan. I'm hearing correctly?
Implementation plan.
An implementation plan. And then once that plan is completed, presumably by fall or winter of 2024, into a final draft, is the intention that it will be Tomo and Birch who's leading the development or the execution of the plan? Because, just in long term, what I'm curious about is where does the plan go from just being a plan to actually getting shovels in the ground and executing, and what will Birch and Tomo's role be in that process?
In terms of the implementation plan itself, what we've heard so far is there's been lots of sensible plans, but it's really about that next immediate step about, well, how to implement it. So we anticipate that after this process, we would come back to council after all the different checkpoints and probably outline for you 2 to 3 different options with very concrete resources, financial as well as different partnership that's needed. And so at that point, it would be up to council to say, out of all these, we pick option B, for example. And then, or what?
Or none.
Or none. That's true. That's true. And based on that, in terms of who you engage with to do the actual work, we're agnostic. It could be, thank you very much, like this is good, but it does not have to be Birch and or Tomo. One of the benefits of going through this exercise is also another opportunity to work with Birch as a non-market housing provider and builder on the island.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I guess just where I'd like to signal my ultimate concern is we've had lots of discussion on community plans so far. There's been lots of planning that's been done so far. And what I would love to see through the process is that we're working towards execution. That there's going to be a plan and it's not going to be 4 or 5, 10 years until that plan gets a shovel in the ground. It's as we're doing the planning, we're lining up funders or developers or whoever it needs to be to provide a development that's going to have a positive social infrastructure here for Bowen Island, whether it's housing or a mix of it or anything else. Yes.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. There's so much opportunity there. And I think my understanding of what's being done right now is to put forward a framework of what implementation can look like. But ultimately, there still needs to be that fair, open, transparent access to development, to the development community, to like whether that's an RFP or a tender process or what have you. So I wouldn't anticipate that we'd be looking, perhaps one of the options is like, okay, we've lined up these folks are keen and interested, but that's something that has to go through a proper public vetting process.
Right. Okay. Councillor Fast for the last question.
Thank you. I'm wondering if in 4A, it talks about servicing, the different parts of servicing, but it doesn't talk about, talk wastewater, septic, roads. Would the concept of prefab panels or prefab pods, like a bathroom pod or a wet wall, those prefab kinds of things that were highlighted in the off-site housing dialogue, which is the session I went to, pre-zoned, pre-approved prefab, they were saying, and I'm not saying all prefab housing here, I'm just thinking about some of these parts of those speed them up kind of efficient and sustainable panels. Would in 4A, the servicing considerations, would roads and access be designed so that you could potentially use some of those prefab ideas and get them in there?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that's,
because just that, I'm not familiar with how these things work, except I know it, you need a big space to get the roof trusses in, and you need to think about how to get them
yeah.
in. So anyway, okay, thank you.
No, I'm nodding as in, no, that's a really good idea. We were not thinking of the prefabricated nature when we wrote 4A. However, it does make a lot of sense. Both Robin and I are already interested in thinking about a more off-site manufacturing. And so what this lends towards, how do we set up ourselves possibly for even more economical as well as the right trades and labor sources here on the island?
Yeah.
How do we do pop-up factories? How do we incorporate some of those ideas in the implementation? So yes, let's incorporate those.
Or how to bring them in, because that's what this early adopter that council has bought into being on that list.
Mhm.
And that's what our Heather McNell from Metro Vancouver mentioned Bowen's name in her introduction to the whole session.
Yeah.
So if we're serious about that, which it sounds like we are, then if you could put that into 4A or wherever it goes in here, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hess, and I believe Councillor Getty to move the recommendation.
Recommends that council endorse the scope of work plan and deliverables for a phased implementation plan for lot 1 of the community lands prepared by Bowen Island Resilient Community Housing and Tomo Spaces dated November 27th, 2023.
Moved, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries unanimously, and I would direct that the check-in at 25% not be optional, and I can see that come back to us in the spring. Thank you. Item 7.1, Cove Bay Water System Amendment Bylaw number 630-2023. And we have our Director of Engineering, Patrick Graham, here with us.
Hello, Mayor, Council. So coming up, we have a project that's going to be connecting the Eagle Cliff and Cove Bay water systems, and part of that project, we expect the number of properties in between those two systems are going to want to join, including probably some properties in the Scarborough area, which makes it essential that before we embark on those discussions that we establish clearly what the boundaries of the Cove Bay water system are currently. So this is really a bylaw amendment bylaw to clean up what's occurred in the past with a number of amendment bylaws that have been brought forward, and going back to one in 2016 that appears to have had some mapping errors. There was properties in the Scarborough area which are not connected to the Cove Bay water system and never have been, that were shown included as part of the Cove Bay water system, and those other properties that are connected and metered and that weren't shown as part of the water system. So this, the amendment bylaw that's being brought forward here today is formally adding 22 properties in the Scarborough area, which have been metered and paying water rates for the Cove Bay system, and as well as paying the parcel tax for the water treatment plant debt. There's not a lot of records as to what happened in the past, how these properties came to be part of the system, but at some point, somebody attached them to a meter and started collecting money from them. So we have no better basis really to define what the water system entails. There's one other property that we're proposing to add as part of this amendment bylaw, and that's 933 Connolly Road, which has had an unofficial water service for many years. And apparently, in discussions with the property owners, they had a deal, they had made a deal with the municipality to essentially have water in perpetuity in exchange for allowing the water main the main water main supplying the system to run through the property. No documentation, so really dealing with verbal agreements. After some discussions with the property owners, we felt that the fairest way to deal with it would be to allow them to be added to the system and to start paying the rates and parcel taxes, which they haven't been to date. They've been getting free water. But not to require the typical infrastructure contribution that a property coming along and wanting to join the water system would be required to pay. And that's the same for the other 22 properties in the Scarborough area as well. Not requiring that those properties pay the approximately 13,000, which is what the going rate for a property coming along wanting to join the Cove water system would be. So that's the purpose of this amendment bylaw. If there's anything that's not clear from the council report or any questions that mayor, councilors have about this amendment bylaw, I can address those now.
Okay. Thank you for doing this work. This is some great detail, and I think it speaks to maybe things not being as clear as they could be in the past, and I think you brought some more clarity to this water district. So I'll look to council for any questions or comments. Councilor Fast?
Just echoing what you've said, please say that it's great to see this housekeeping kind of records catching up, and mapping errors do happen. I've seen them in the Islands Trust as well, so it's good to fix them when they're discovered and make it so it's clear for everybody going forward and fair for all taxpayers and water rate users. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Gilly?
Well, with respect to all of the previous people involved in this, it does feel like it's more professional now in terms of, I mean, I look at these different maps that are attached to all the different bylaws and I want to put them somehow, tape them up on the window and put them on top of each other and see what's going on, because I'm glad you think it's clear. I think it's still very muddy, and I'm relying on you in terms of having figured it all out in terms of the ones that are circled in brown and circled in purple and light blue and all the rest of the stuff. So thank you. I'll take your word for it.
Okay. Councilor Morse?
It's to do with Schedule A. You've got the list of the properties that are being added, but on Schedule A, you've got two different colors. And to me, that's confusing. I mean, once we've adopted this bylaw, Schedule A, they should just be outlined in blue. They shouldn't have the little blue shading inside them, so that the entire Cove Bay area is shown the same way. Or else you shade the whole Cove Bay area, the shaded blue.
The intent of shading them is to identify which properties are being added.
Then it should be a separate schedule, because your bylaw says Schedule A of Bowen Island Municipality is hereby replaced with the revised Schedule A, which anybody saying, okay, this is the new boundary. So.
Boundary is shown, and there's the properties highlighted are the ones.
But why not highlight all the ones that were added by previous bylaws?
Because every amendment bylaw, the intent of the amendment bylaw is typically to add a property or a number of properties. So what's been done.
All I'm saying is Schedule A should be, every property that's within the boundary should be shown exactly the same. And I thought the intent of Schedule A was to say, now we passed this bylaw that's added these, here's the new Schedule A that has them all in it. And nobody's any different from anybody else. Whether they were added in 2000 or 2023, they all look the same.
I think we need to show which properties are being added.
That should be a separate schedule, then that should be not Schedule A. Schedule A should show them all. Anyhow, we can argue about that before we get to fourth reading. But I think your map is needs to be changed.
Thank you, Councillor Morse. Councillor Fast has spoken already. I believe there's a comment from the CAO.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to make a comment that Schedule A, as it is currently presented, does show all of the existing properties within the boundaries, and the highlighted is just showing the additional ones that are being added through this amendment. So we can discuss that further about whether there needs to be an additional map or not.
Thank you. The only question I have is in regards to, how would I frame this? It sounds like there's been a historical issue around documenting the connections to the water system. And as part of this work, has that all been corrected now across water systems generally? I would just like to presume that we're no longer doing verbal agreements with property holders about connections or anything like that.
No, we're not. And I can't say for 100% certainty that we won't encounter something with.
We will 100% encounter something else.
But we've done our best here to at least clean up the Cold Bay water system.
Okay. Great. Just for the sake of time, I mean, unless there's anything really new and pertinent to add before we get a recommendation on the floor, Councillor Morse?
Well, it's my loving to be able to follow the trail. I went back through my files this morning and I can't, do you actually have the map that was the 3 maps that were referred to in the original bylaw? They were from the GVRD, because I couldn't find those anywhere. The original bylaw doesn't have them attached, it just refers to the maps as per bylaws, 3 bylaws from the GVRD that were amended from time to time.
So the original establishment?
Well, we passed an establishment bylaw in 2000. And the area of the Cove Bay water system was referred to as the area specified in 3 bylaws, or the maps for 3 bylaws from the GVRD. But those maps aren't anywhere in my file.
I would have to.
You don't have them either. So we don't know if those guys were in there originally and we inadvertently left them out somewhere along the line.
I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Fast?
It's just, it's Schedule A.
Yep.
I don't see what Councillor Morse is talking about. I only see one.
Well, you have to look at the original bylaw. What I'm just talking about now.
The only one I can see in what's in front of us that we're giving first, second, and third reading. Is there a problem with that?
Yeah, so the point raised was that all of the property colors in Schedule A, the preference of Councillor Morse was to have them all in one color.
We only have one color. So this is my question, except for that funny blotchy part. So I want to make sure we're all looking at the same thing. Excuse me for a moment. I only see one color except that little area. Is this correct?
No, that's not, no. So that's from 2016.
Oh, thank you. Okay, all right, I'm set.
It's the one at the end of the council report.
Thank you. I just had a moment of, oh my God. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I will look for a motion from council, please. Councillor Getty?
Sorry. Bylaw 630, 2023 cited as Bowen Island Municipality, Cove Bay Water System and Local Advisory Committee purpose and establishment bylaw number 9, 2000, amendment bylaw number 630, 2023 be read a first, second, and third time.
Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Fast. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Grant. Item 7.2, draft encroachment policy. Dana Martin, our manager of planning and development. So this is coming back to us as an edited version. Do you have any comments on this, Mr. Martin, or you just like us to proceed?
I do just have a couple of quick reviews, I guess. Just by way of background, this came to you in November. Staff have made a few edits to the policy since you last saw it, in particular in response to comments from council. So clarifying some language about retaining walls, specifying things like gravel shoulders, et cetera, as long as there's not an exclusive use of that area. And then most significantly in the encroachment policy is remove the category of invasive encroachments to something that's not supported unless it's a historic encroachment. So that's saying that you would not support an application for a exclusive or an invasive encroachment, one that provides exclusive use for a thing like a building or a fenced-in yard. And that would have to get referred to council, but something that staff wouldn't support. At the November meeting, council referred them to committees. We haven't yet held the committee meetings, but staff are looking for first reading of the bylaw so we can start the island stress referral process at the same time as referring to committees. And then we have a draft committee, or draft bylaws to discuss with committees as well. So the bylaw 629 is to amend the traffic use of streets bylaw. It would add definitions for terms within it. It would delegate to the director of engineering to issue the permits for encroachments, and then it updates other fees in bylaw 133 as well. And then, so this is, staff have identified the need to refer this checklist to the Islands Trust. And so you see in your report discussion on the 4 directive policies that apply to the proposed encroachment policy and the draft bylaw, and the discussion with them. And so just in terms of process where we are, so introduced to council in November, first reading of the bylaw seeking referral to Islands Trust and committees to come back. And we anticipate, because it's fairly complex policy and bylaw, that it would come back for a second reading and then it would come back for a third reading and then adoption. So rather than seeking second and third together and then adoption, we would space it out to allow more time for any council comments. And then finally, just a note, the recommendation in our report is different in the agenda sheet, and that it has language referring it to the bylaw to the FAC and TAC committees, as well as sending the bylaw and the policy statement to the Islands Trust.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the planner before we get a motion on the floor? Councillor Fast.
First off, I've got 2 questions. One of them is, in the definitions, where are the unopened right-of-ways to water and trails? Because I don't see them in the streets definition, which says something about normally open to the public, and I don't see them in municipal lands. So where would I, in the definitions, if people are looking, I want to make sure they're captured.
Point of order, are you talking about the policy or the bylaw?
I'm on page 2 of 6.
The policy.
Sorry, I'm in the definitions part of the policy. Is that okay to talk about that?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay. Page 2 of 6. And my page numbers are different because I'm in.
Okay, so just a quick summation of the question.
Specifically, your question was?
It looks to me, I don't see in the definition about the definitions, where are the unopened right-of-ways to water or trails that are not normally open to the public yet?
So most of those would be captured as a public roadway. So we take roads, access to water as a road. That is, sometimes they're undeveloped roads, but they would still be a public roadway.
Somewhere in there, if we could say undeveloped, because right now, the only definition is in streets and it says normally open to the public. So that would be one thing. And the second one is on page 2 of 2. Now I'm out of the 2 of 6, sorry, where it says, near the bottom of the page, it says in red, the following encroachments are only permitted if they are historic. Could that be better worded as may only be permitted? Because they have to apply, right, if it's discovered. Right now it says are only permitted. And I just think that could be clear. Thank you. And I'm glad to see the, because that sort of conflicts with the retroactive bit at the end as well. So that'll help clear that up. Thank you. I'd be ready to move a motion when you're ready.
I'll just look for any other questions from councillors. Councillor Getty?
All right. With respect to the policy document, I had a couple of probably wordsmithing comments that shouldn't necessarily interfere with first reading, but I think that it's more than just typos and spelling. I think has to do with the interpretation of things. So in scope, the last sentence of that paragraph, I think, should remove and wherever it's used, and change it to or. I think we're giving alternatives. And with respect to guiding principles, in the last sentence, there's I would remove the word generally, unless we want to have some sort of a general concept with exceptions to that. I think that this is confusing and potentially misleading. I had the same problem as Councillor Fast with respect to understanding the following encroachments are only permitted if they're historic encroachments, and then the list following, and it's whether or not, in fact, that whole section is not clear in terms of invasive encroachments, and whether if they're historical or not allowed at all, or what the distinctions are. I think that needs some work and some clarification. And I also would find it helpful, either from the street bylaw or this one, a definition of what is meant by driveway access and driveway access permits. So, for instance, I have a driveway that goes across the boulevard from the paved section, and is that now subject to a $500 permit with a $100 a year renewable? And I think that is a question that appears to be the case and needs clarification, either by way of reference to the street or a definition of driveway.
Yeah, and just if I may answer that last question through the mayor. So driveway access permit is something that would not need an encroachment permit. It's to permit essentially your pavement to go from the edge of the pavement to the property line, and that's done through the driveway access permit. So that would fall under like the definition of encroachment, because it's, you know, work's done in the municipal right of way, but it's sort of a separate category that we've outlined that would continue to exist as a driveway access permit, but we can make sure there's clarity.
I mean, that's in your interpretation of it. It's not clear in the descriptions. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome. So I will look for a motion on this piece of business. Yes, Councillor Morris.
A question, why are we referring the encroachment policy to the Islands Trust? It's all in the bylaws, I thought we had to refer.
It is only the bylaw, but the policy felt provided just the helpful background for them to interpret what's going on with the bylaw itself. So like, I guess you're right, if council just referred the bylaw, then staff would be forwarding the policy as well in terms of that staff report. So whether it's redundant in the motion itself, but we would be sending the staff report and the supporting staff reports and documents to the Islands Trust.
Yeah, I would prefer that. We're just doing the proper referral as per the referral process. Because we don't want them sitting in the and I think probably still needs a lot of fiddling around with because it hasn't gone to the various committees. So I'll move that council refer bylaw number 620. Oh, sorry. The council give first reading to bylaw number 629, 2023, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Traffic and Use of Streets, bylaw number 133, 2005, amendment bylaw number 629, 2023, and the council refer bylaw number 629, 2023, and attached Islands Trust policy statement checklist to the Islands Trust.
By Councillor Morris. Seconded by Councillor Fast. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? And that carries. Thank you. Councillor Giddy.
One of the motions that we made at an earlier meeting was to also refer it to the Financial Advisory Committee and Foundation Advisory Committee, and I'm wondering if that was done, and if not, if we should be including them as well.
I believe that planner, they've been referred, but they haven't been formally presented and discussed because of timing.
We could ask the planner.
think that's what you said.
So it's yes, this is what I said. It was referred, and so actually the report itself seeks a referral of the bylaw 629 basically at 10.
Great, thank you. Moving on, 7.3 Energy Step Code 4. Again with you, Mr. Martin.
There. At your November 14th meeting, you presented on changes to the recommended changes to the building bylaws to bring about in the Energy Step Code 4 of the BC Step Code and the Zero Carbon Step Code Level 1. So staff have brought a bylaw for you to amend the building bylaw to make that change, and just by way of this overall process. So seeking first reading at this meeting, at which point we want to do outreach to the building community, in particular, those people who are licensed and build houses on Bowen quite frequently, to seek their input on changes, as well as the greater Bowen community, to come back for a second and third reading of the bylaw and adoption, aiming for the spring of 2024. But the bylaw amendment itself comes into effect January 1st, 2025. So that would give us opportunity to do more focused training workshops in terms of achieving that Step Code 4, so the higher level of building. So the recommendation is to give first reading to bylaw 628, 2023. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Morse.
Just for clarification, we're giving first reading to the bylaw that was put in our own table package.
Yes.
Can I have a mover for the recommendation, please?
So I'll move that council give first reading to bylaw number 628, 2023, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Building Bylaw number 489, 2019 amendment bylaw number 628, 2023.
Moved by Councilor Morse, seconded by Councilor Getty. Any discussion, Councilor Jurgensen?
Audio not on. This was more actually a question for the planner,
Okay.
the chair. With mentioning that wouldn't come into effect until January 1st of 2025, would that mean that buildings built next year, for example, would be not measured towards step code until January 1st? Or does that mean that in January 1st, we'd be then going retroactively through 2024 and applying?
Through the mayor, so the change would come into effect January 1st, 2025. So permits issued after that date would have to be achieving Step 4. Permits issued in 2024 would still continue to meet Step 3. And so if you were issued in 2024, even December, you would still be under the Step Code that was in effect when your permit was issued and not.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Jurgensen. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Martin. Item 8.1, Municipal Wharf Reserve Moorage Assignment Policy.
Do you have Doug Woods on Zoom today?
Okay. Just for questions or a presentation or comment at all?
And our CFO, Kristen Watson, can also help speak to as needed.
Okay. So are there any opening comments to this or just open, should I open the council for questions?
Oh, I don't know if Doug Woods has any opening comments, but.
Oh, Doug, I see you on screen. How are you?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Mayor. Hi, Council.
Any comments on this item or are you just looking to take questions at this point?
I don't know if you guys have all read the report that accompanied it. Basically, as it says, we're looking at the wharf bylaw from a couple of different perspectives. We were directed to look at the rates and we were directed to come up with a draft policy for reserved moorage assignments at our two government docks. And so that's what the policy is. It does come with some changes to how things would have been done in the past at Mount Gardner dock, and I understand we got some letters objecting to the policy's proposal. So if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. I will look to council for questions, starting with Councillor Morris, then Councillor Fast.
Am I missing something? The fees aren't in here?
No, that'll be coming in a separate report with that.
That was the first question. The second was, there's other wharves, I'm not really keen on the idea that you get a thing for a year and then you can't put your name in the wait list at the same time as everybody else. What do the other communities around the coast that have, like Gibson's, I know has a Gibson's Marina, it may be run by their port authority, but what are their policies for moorage? Is it 1 year or do you get 5 years or what's the renewal? I
mean, I looked into that a bit when I was looking at how rates are done in other places, and it varies throughout different public and private wharves, whether they have daily, weekly, monthly, annual, depending on the place. But to speak to your original point of, you weren't keen on the idea of somebody having to wait a bit before putting their name back on. That was only because we've seen a big uptick in the demand for space at these docks. I don't think it used to be quite the demand that we have today. And we're just trying to think of ways to make it more fair for people. If you can just throw your name and say, oh, well, yeah, I want to be in for 2024, but just put my name down as I want to be in for the subsequent 10 years after that as well. So that's the reasoning why we're trying to sort of space it out and put a little delay there so that other people have a chance to use this public amenity. That was the thinking behind that anyway.
So my understanding is that it's an annual thing and you have to put your name on the wait list every year.
That is how it has worked in the past.
Isn't that what's in your new one?
Slight change. In the past, we just added people's names when they called in, essentially. And what that meant at Snug Cove Wharf was we would add it in and we would go through giving preference to people that wanted the full season of reserve moorage. At Mount Gardner Wharf, it's been a little different. There's been a wait list that's been in existence for many, many years. I think there's about 15 people on the wait list. I get calls 2 to 4 times a year from people on that wait list asking if anything's changed. And I had a call just a few days ago from someone on the wait list who was 4th on the wait list. They've been on the wait list for 10 years. So part of this policy is to address these inordinate wait times for that particular dock. It hasn't been an issue so much at Snug Cove. That's been working pretty well. But I'm happy to take any suggestions you have in that regard. I don't look at this as a final policy. There's room to make changes here.
I didn't realize you were contemplating using the same wait list every just adding on. So why don't you have a brand new wait list that starts every year on say a certain time period and everybody has to phone in, and that way you know that the people on the wait list are still interested. And why shouldn't the person who's already got the spot have the same options and timing as everybody else?
Good question. I mean, I'm happy to look into that further and see what the public makes of that same question. We just felt it was, if you I don't know how you feel about whether or not it matters whether the same person has access to that spot, forever, essentially. If that's acceptable, then, that's fine. We can adjust our policy in that direction.
Well, having been a boat owner and having had a slip, not here, but elsewhere, you fully expect that once you get it, you get to keep it, unless you don't use the boat and it sits there unused.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Councillor Fast.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this. I'm really excited about the concept of non-exclusive use of public space and expensive public infrastructure. I think it should be shared. I'm excited about the idea of fairness and equitable public access. So I think this is great. I'm suggesting it could be a tiny bit clearer, or maybe you can explain to me why at the bottom of reserve moorage for Mount Gardner Dock, the second last sentence, it says, a holder of a Mount Gardner Dock berthage license agreement may only add their name to the wait list for the following year starting October 1st each year, whereas in the one above, it says after June 15th. I'm just thinking somebody could, is that a typo?
The June 15th was actually a typo.
Oh, okay.
That was, I believe that was supposed to be October 1st as well.
No. Sorry, I'm misleading you, Doug. I'm looking at June 15th. Above it is for Snug Cove Wharf.
Oh.
And I really like your last line there, except because it says after June 15th. I just see a collision. Everybody's going to be calling you on for Mount Gardner Dock starting October 1st. Should it say after?
Wait, are we talking about Mount Gardner Dock or are we talking about Snug Cove Wharf?
Oh, I'm really confusing. I was confusing myself. Sorry. Mount Gardner Dock.
Yes. So you're saying after October 1st to expect a ton of calls?
No, well, it's saying may only add their name to the wait list for the following year, starting October 1st. Isn't that the same day that you're going to be starting October 1st, the Wharfinger will contact boat owners on the wait list?
And that the period of their moorage would start on January 1st. So,
okay, you're going to get a lot of calls on October the 1st. That's all. I guess that's fine, and that's fair enough. I support rolling it over, and I would even go to a lottery or something like that if demand gets that high, as we've done before for swimming lessons.
I mean, just to be clear about that, I would like to honor, to whatever degree possible, the existing wait list for Mount Gardner Dock, just because those people have been on that list in some cases for 15 years, and I feel like they should maybe get a kick at the can before we open it up, but that's just.
Oh, totally. I agree with that. Sorry, through the chair.
Yep.
I just meant in the future, if we need to go to a lottery program, that would also be something worth thinking about, because I know we've done it before, but just depending on demand. I'm in favor of this, and I'd be happy to move the motion when you're ready.
Thank you. My only question is just how big is the wait list for Mount Gardner Dock right now?
Right now, I think there's about 15 names on it.
Okay, great, thank you. Councillor Getty, then Councillor Saunders.
I think there's different policy that we might be able to devise that would be most helpful for the two different docks. I think that Snug Cove with two private marinas and I think just my visual assessment is that there's more space. That is a slightly different situation than Mount Gardner. And I also, in the letters, the letter from Bonnie Lake and Roger Milstead, for instance, they say that they were on the waiting list for 19 years before they got a spot. And Cindy Mercer doesn't say how long she has been waiting, but she's, I think that it's a smaller area. I am concerned about the parking in the area. If there's, the people that live there and live in the community and maybe are walking distance and they're not using up very limited parking space. The fact that the one letter from Irene Collis and Tony Mainwaring talking about how during the off season they're keeping an eye on some of the boats and bailing some boats out on occasion, and that's helpful and important. So somehow or other, I'm feeling that there needs to be some different principles with Mount Gardner. And it's a smaller, more remote, more difficult area for parking, and that that the one size fits all might not work for that area. So I don't necessarily have any suggestions, but I think that those are important principles to. I'm also concerned in terms of the whole idea of equity. If somebody gets a spot there, then, does it get sort of part of the estate and go down to the kids and the family and the grandkids, and nobody else ever has a chance? Some way of protecting that. And
that's currently happening. That's part of the problem.
Yeah, and like Councillor Morris is talking about, if somebody's not using a boat and it's just taking up space, they haven't made good use of the amenity, that is something that needs to be sort of like chalking the tires on a parking. But somehow or other, I think it needs a different policy because it's just the nature of what it is, where it is.
Thank you. Not being a boat owner and not having this top of mind, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on what I'm reading here. And I think this is related to Councillor Morris' question. If I have one of those spots at Snug Cove, I've got it for a year according to this, and then I go back and I got to get on a waiting list to get it again next year. Or if I've got a spot, I can renew. I'm not clear on which it is.
We're talking about Snug Cove Wharf or Mount Gardner?
Okay, both.
Snug Cove Wharf, the reserved moorage currently goes from September 15th to June 15th. We call it a reserved winter moorage. Whereas at Mount Gardner Dock, it's a 1-year moorage term that goes from January 1st to December 31st each year.
Okay, and in each case, it's a coin flip to get onto a waiting list and.
In both cases, to this point, it has been basically when people express an interest, they're added to an existing list for the following year. And the way it's worked out in Snug Cove, because like you say, it is bigger, it hasn't really been an issue. We've been pretty successful just using that basic waiting list. We haven't been overwhelmed with requests. But I noted this year was probably the first year that all of those spots were taken for the entire duration of that term. So that was kind of an indication to me that there's a growing demand for that one. And yeah, it is a little different at Mount Gardner being a full year.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank you.
Right. And then for clarity, the current system at Mount Gardner is if you come off the wait list and get a spot, you've had it for.
Get to renew.
You get it for as long as you'd like, correct?
Yeah, and that's what I had noticed was the way I was trained when I came into this position was you just automatically renew to whoever is already there.
Right.
So then you get these long, like people that have been there 15 years.
Right. And it effectively becomes their private dock.
Correct.
Okay. Councillor Wig.
I'm still not clear. There are only 3 reserved spots at Mount Gardner. And if you've got 15 people on that wait list, it seems to me like they need a lottery system. Because even having the first come, first serve, why isn't everybody phoning you at midnight on the day that you're opening it up? Just seems like a strange way to set it up.
I think what the idea is with that October 1st thing is that only applies to the 3 people that have a current arrangement for say that previous calendar year. Then they have to wait. Everyone else can get on the list whenever, January 1st. The idea is to give other people a chance to get their names on the list before the person who is currently on the dock has their opportunity to put their name back in the hat as well. That's the only reason for that delay.
Okay. So in other words, you only get 1 year, and then you're going to be out because somebody else is going to be on the wait list, presumably.
So effectively, it would take 5 years to cycle through that.
Right. Okay.
If there's 15.
The current 15.
Yeah.
I guess there's one other question. If there are 25-foot spots, if you had 2 boats that were each 12 feet or under, could they then share a spot?
Not necessarily.
Are all the boats that are on the list, between 20 and 25 feet?
I don't know, actually. I have a list of names and contacts. I don't have the details on those boats at this time. We'd have to work that out. The dock itself, the spaces can accommodate a 25-foot boat, but they would be hanging over the ends of the available space. You've got the 2 ends of the dock and the backside, 1 spot on the backside. The front side is open for transient. So 25 feet would already be overhanging at the bow and stern.
So I note that we're in second and third round of questions here. So the move is either move a recommendation. Great, thank you.
I move that council endorse the municipal wharf reserved moorage assignment policy.
By Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Councillor Jurgens, are you in favor or opposed?
Sorry, that was in favor.
Okay, so that carries with Councillor Saunders, Morse, and Getty opposed. Moving on to item 8.2, introduction to an application for development variance permit at 211 Highland Trail. We have our community planner, Drew, back in here with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So Bowen Island Municipality has received an application for a development variance permit to request the reduction of side setback requirements in order to legalize several non-conforming accessory structures. The applicants recently purchased the property at 211 Highland Trail and were unaware of several bylaw infractions regarding 3 unpermitted accessory storage sheds, as well as a deck that were built by a previous owner within minimum setback areas. All of the structures are within the side setback, with the exception of one shed in the front setback area, which is to be removed. The development variance permit was previously granted in 2016 for a reduction of the front setback requirements from 7.5 to 5.5 meters. A condition of the variance approval was that the required off-street parking spaces be preserved in the front yard area. Therefore, the unauthorized shed in the front setback could not be accommodated within this variance request. The current request before council is to vary section 4.5.2, clause 1, by reducing the minimum side setback from 3 meters to 0.25 meters in order to legalize 2 storage sheds and a deck. It's noted that the 2 sheds in the side yard are accessed from the north and south and do not require trespassing onto the neighboring property to the east. The actual setback for the structures is 0.32 meters. However, the applicant has requested a lesser setback in anticipation of adding required cladding to the sheds at the building permit stage. Here's some site photos showing the sheds themselves. So the first 2 are those that are requested within this application within the side setback area. Third one is the shed within the front setback area, which is proposed to be removed. And then I guess I should mention the shed that's also, so the deck that's also subject to this variance is also visible in the first photo. That's just the specific part of the deck that shed is sitting on is obviously that's.
Shed number 2.
That's right, yeah. And so it's the deck area directly beneath that's within the setback area, which is also part of this application. And then just a few photos in there just to try to show how steep the property is, something obviously not visible at all on flat maps when you're looking at it. But yeah, I was pretty taken aback when I went up there. There's not a whole lot of flat land for buildings. So yeah, just first photo there on the left is just kind of standing adjacent to the property adjacent to the residence and then kind of looking down the backyard, just a real drop off there. And then the photo on the right, that's right next to shed number 2 that we're just showing the photo in the last slide. And it's just to show how high that is off the ground. It's a couple meters from the deck to the ground there. The application was advertised in advance of the DVP's introduction to council, including notices being circulated to neighborhood property owners in a 100-meter radius. Next, I was going to show an image of where letters of support have been received, and I actually don't want to show that now because I just see that very recently some more support has come in, and I see it on the agenda. However, it's redacted at this point, so I'm not able to show it on there. So I'd rather just come back to council at the consideration stage and show where those all have been received. But I'll just note kind of a summary. So there are 2 letters directly on the agenda noting support. And I'm aware of a third letter, and that'll have to be on the next council agenda, but it's a third letter that's signed by 2 neighbors, and they state they own a company which owns a third property in the area. So it's kind of a total of 5 5 properties indicating support from 3 letters. And so finally, staff recommend that council authorizes staff to give notice for the consideration of a DVP 2023-0244 at the January 22nd, 2024 meeting of council.
Okay, great, thank you. Given that this is just the The recommendation is just to issue notice. I'll look for the recommendation to be put on the floor, please. Councillor Fast.
I move that notice be given that council will be considering the issuance of development permit number DVP 2023-0244 for the variance of the minimum side setback for 2 storage sheds and a deck for 211 Highland Trail, legally described as Lot 9 of Lot 2, Block 6 to 8, District Lot 1552, Plan 4712, PID 011397853 at the January 22nd, 2024 meeting of council, and that council authorize staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of DVP 2023-0244 in accordance with Section 499 of the Local Government Act to all properties within 100 meters of the legal boundary of 211 Highland Trail, legally described as Lot 9 of Lot 2, Block 6 to 8, District Lot 1552, Plan 4712, PID 011397853.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any debate on giving notice for this DVP? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 8.3, application to renew a temporary use permit at 1034 Miller Road. And joining us again is Drew Backen.
Thank you, Mayor Laird. So Bowen Island Municipality has received a request to renew a temporary use permit for general service use at 1034 Miller Road. Christine Smith of Jersey Investments Incorporated is the owner of the property, which for years has been used by multiple entities, including an ambulance station with EMT offices, an insurance office, and an accessory dwelling unit. The insurance office has been in operation since 2008 and was originally permitted as home occupation, considering that the owner lived in the accessory dwelling unit at the time. After the owner moved out, the insurance office was no longer permitted under the zoning, considering that general services was not a permitted use in the zone, and it couldn't be permitted as a home business without the owner residing at the property. The owner applied for it to be permitted under a temporary use permit, which was approved by council on November 9th, 2020 for a 3-year term. In anticipation of the permit validity ending in November 2023, the applicant prepared a rezoning application to request permanent allowance of the general services use. Due to the length of the rezoning process, as well as the fact that the current temporary use permit lapsed last month, a reissuance of the temporary use permit is necessary to allow the insurance office to continue operating until rezoning is complete. No changes are proposed to the 683 square foot area of the building to be used for the office, nor any exterior changes proposed. Off-street parking requirements are met by the parking areas provided at the front and rear of the building. No complaints or issues have been reported during the past years of operations of the insurance office, and none have been received following the advertising of this renewal application. Notices were issued to properties in a 100-meter radius, as well as online and through the undercurrent ahead of the introduction to council. A letter of support was submitted by the owner of 2 neighboring properties. There it is. And it's noted that under section 497 of the Local Government Act, for a renewal of a temporary use permit, council does have the option to either directly renew the temporary use permit at this meeting, or else to direct staff to advertise for a consideration date in a subsequent council hearing that would be January 22nd, 2024. Also, it's noted that a temporary use permit may only be renewed once. With no issues reported in the past and none anticipated, staff recommends that council issues a renewal of temporary use permit TUB 02-2019.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wake.
I'm prepared to make the recommendation.
Okay.
Sorry. I did have a question before we move to the recommendation, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Jurgensen.
I just wanted to note that I am concerned with temporary use permits being used in lieu of rezoning, so I'm glad to see that in this case a rezoning application has been completed. I did want to ask to Planner Backen whether 1062 Miller Road is within the 100-meter radius. I believe it is, but I'm not sure. Would like some clarification on that.
Sorry, what was the address? 1062?
1062.
I don't think that it falls within that 100 meters. Nope. It's cut off by this map that I'm looking at. I don't see that on the list.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Getty first, then Councillor Morse.
All right, so there's comment here that Councillor Jurgensen has just referred to in terms of the applicant has prepared a rezoning application to request permanent allowance.
That's correct. They've submitted the application.
And further down in the underneath general services, there's the first paragraph. Let's see, it is page 5 of 14. The paragraph starts, for renewal of a temporary use permit, council has the option of directing, the last sentence there, under section 497 sub 2 of the Local Government Act, temporary use permit may only be renewed once, and that has been made clear to the applicant?
Yes, they did not want to renew this to begin with. They were planning to just submit directly for a rezoning, but unfortunately they waited until, unfortunately it was at the point where the permit was already lapsing, and since a rezoning could take up to a year, technically wouldn't be an authorized legal business operating during that time, so we did have to have a discussion with them to renew. But they're otherwise looking to still move forward with the rezoning in the new year.
Councillor Morse?
I was just clarifying, notice hasn't gone to any of the related, the surrounding area or adjacent properties, right? Because it's not required when it's renewal like this.
We did issue them ahead of this introduction. They would be, if council wishes to not renew at this meeting and to have that at a consideration meeting next month, then we would send those notices again. We would issue those again to.
So the neighbors have been notified?
They have been, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Wake?
Yes, I recommend that council issue a renewal of temporary use permit TUP 02-2019 for general services use for 1034 Miller Road, legally described as Lot 8, Block 1, District Block 490, Plan 7806, at the December 11th, 2023 meeting of council.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on this before calling the question? My only comment is that I am supportive of this one. I'm starting to feel that temporary use permits generally are going to become popular here for council. We've seen a couple of renewals already, and we're seeing a couple of issuances already. And I would like to see, what I'm happy about with this one is that there is a rezoning coming forward for it, because I think, if we're using temporary use permits as an addition for zoning, then they need to be in tandem with an actual zoning process. So this one I'm okay with, and I'm okay to do, and I appreciate the applicants brought forward a rezoning, but I would like it to be strongly encouraged to applicants who are coming forward for renewals to have that in conjunction with some kind of rezoning process. Otherwise, it's going to be 3 years, the council's just going to see it so many times, and it's going to eat staff, and it's going to be contentious in the community.
So, question of clarification, my understanding is you can only renew a temporary use permit once.
Yeah, you can only renew a temporary use permit once, but it comes to council for the issuance, it comes to council for the renewal, and then if it's going to be rezoned, it comes to council again for the rezoning, which involves a public hearing and everything else that's commensurate with that.
Perpetual reissuing.
Exactly, yeah.
But they can
Please wait to be recognized, Councillor Wake.
So I think what we want to add to your comment is maybe we need a mechanism to advise when a temporary use permit is issued. If they do want to consider a rezoning, they have to come a year before it's going to expire.
Right.
That sounds like they just weren't aware.
Yeah. Okay.
Or they don't count.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 That carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 8.4, application to renew a temporary use permit at 620 Laura Road. Over to Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. So again, with a temporary use permit that's up for renewal, this one at 620 Laura Road. So Laura Road is located off of West Side Road on the west side of the island. The property is zoned rural residential 2. It permits a number of uses, including agriculture, and the definition for agriculture is there. It's about growing, rearing, producing, harvesting crops, livestock, other animals on the lot. So TUP 2021-0017 was issued March of 2021, expires of March 2024. It permits the use of cidery on the property. And there's a definition there that's in the temporary use permit. The TUP issued, it also has, conditions on prohibiting lounge use that can sometimes be associated with a cidery. Has conditions on a maximum floor area for retail, maximum patio size, and it sets maximum hours the cidery may be open to the public from Monday to Sunday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Staff received the renewal application in November of this year, reviewed the application and the current operations of the cidery under the TUP, and saw referrals regarding had concerns or complaints been made about the operation of the Riley cidery under the TUP. So the report lists some of the comments that staff have received regarding 620 Laura Road, and no specific concerns about the operations of Riley cidery. So what I note here is for the TUP, staff support the renewal of the TUP 2021-0017 and would seek the applicant to apply for a rezoning within the term of the renewed TUP. I will say, just in light of this and the previous application, you saw that staff have had with this and the previous application, many conversations about seeking rezoning applications. And in fact, the other renewal that council has seen at IDC on Cape Drive is in the same boat in terms of had a renewed TUP. We've not received a rezoning application for that one. They're on my reminder list. As with this one, it's like no application was made and we've received the renewal application. And so, as I said, we received the application early November. Internal review sent out initial notice to neighbors at the end of November through December. Notice sign placed on site. The notice was sent to people within 300 meters, and then notice in the undercurrent on the BIM website. So, as we noticed with noted with the previous report, council may issue a renewal at this meeting or may seek additional notice period. And in that case, we would recommend a February 12th consideration date be set. The applicant, so the properties colored in, shaded in, are properties within 300 meters of the property. So we use that mailing list the same as when the TUP was issued. The application provided 6 letters of support, support from 6 properties within the notification area as part of their renewal application. And then we've received 1 letter of opposition following that application. And in your agenda, you'll see 3 additional letters of support from Bowen residents who are outside the notification area. And I'll note the application as well had 2 letters of support from employees of the cidery. So the recommendation before you is to renew the TUP 2021-0017 for cidery use for 620 Laura Road.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council? Councillor Fast, and then Councillor
I was going to read the motion.
You first, or are you going to read that?
Did I groan out loud?
Councillor Fast.
That council renew temporary use permit 2021-0017 for cidery use at 620 Laura Road, legally described as Lot 1, Block D, District Lot 492, Plan Q250, PID 015026701.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on this one? Councillor Giddey?
I'd like to propose that the February 13th date be used just to give additional time for feedback and notice to be given. I do note in one of the letters received there is some significant concerns about this property by neighbors, and just would like to give a little bit more time for both sides in support and not in support to have time to respond to the notice.
Right. So for just to respond, Councillor Jurgensen, for this motion, the motion is to renew. It's not to issue notice. It's to renew the temporary use permit.
Unmute audio.
Councilor Getty?
Oh, okay, thank you.
When the previous council discussed this was when there was that general amendment to this was the OCP in terms of taking out the language of short-term and seasonal and putting in all of the areas around the whole island and changing the definition of temporary use. And that was from my perspective at the time, certainly, and I don't know that I've changed, I think that was a massive change and that changed the character of TUPs altogether so that we're, the comments in the previous TUP, we're now, in some ways, it feels like we're skirting around the whole process of having a public hearing and a rezoning application and all of the amendments and the nuances that can come from that whole process. You know, on the basis of the protecting the existing orchard and the community support for the business and the people, that's one consideration. But the other one is just there's still, it appears to be, although we don't have comments from the neighbors that opposed it the first time, except for the one letter from Margaret Underhill and Brian Buckingham. We've got a division in this community, and that hasn't gone away. And I think that in terms of if council is going to be able to help try to sort that out and look at all of the details, then it needs to be something more than a temporary use permit application. And there needs to be more discussion. There's not enough, it seems to me, consideration of what the differences are in the traffic. I don't know that we had a baseline, and there's anecdotal evidence that there's been an increase, but we should have been able to keep track of the parking that was required and available, and whether or not there's any incidents with respect to any problems with respect to any of the traffic, either speeding or any other behavior. And that's what would affect the neighbors the most in terms of one of the letters talks about enjoying that's coming from the area. I'm not sure what that indicates in terms of sound carrying or what some of the issues are. So this puts council in, I think the fact that there isn't a rezoning application and the fact that that hasn't happened, my understanding is that was a missed deadline. It wasn't part of the plan, but it was something that was not highlighted either from our end or from the applicant's end, and that we're left in this situation in terms of, do we just renew or do we start considering some of the issues? I don't have enough information with respect to what I believe it's in the staff report that there were some considerations, breaches of some environmental considerations, and that was cleared up. There were 3 reports, 3 official complaints, and that was resolved. I don't know enough about that or anything in terms of what the complaints were and how it was resolved, and whether or not that should be a concern. And I think that it's really difficult to put council in the position of trying to mediate the conflicting interests when we're dealing with this very minimal kind of process. So I'm not reassured that they aren't going to apply for rezoning. I haven't, unlike the previous one, there hasn't been any movement, and I think that that's a shame.
Thank you, Councilor Getty. To the CAO.
I just wanted to make a clarifying point, because I think the way that Councilor Getty made the statement, it sounded like there were 3 official concerns or complaints about environmental issues, but there was one concern about an environmental issue that was resolved relatively soon, shortly after the initial issuance of the TUP, and there were 3 official complaints to bylaw services. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear.
All right, fair enough.
Thank you. Councillor Jurgensen, I saw that your hand was up, and then Councillor Wake.
Audio now unmuted.
I actually put it down, but thank you for recognizing that it was up.
Welcome. Councillor Wake.
It's my understanding that the applicant is going to come forward for the zoning application. I don't know the reason why it didn't come sooner, but same problem as we just identified in the previous TUP. I think the concerns that Councillor Getty is raising are legitimate, but I think the time for addressing those would be in the rezoning application. And I don't know if we can require or confirm that there will be a rezoning application. Can we, I don't know, can we require that?
And there, with the TUP renewal, it's not possible for council to place additional conditions on the TUP. You can renew there. You could, decide not to renew and instead invite a new application for a new TUP that would go through the notification process. I'm not sure that could be done by March. I mean, council could say, we're going to have a consideration period and set the date of February 12th, and you could strongly say that, as a factor in your evaluation, you want to see if there's a rezoning application submitted in that time period. So it wouldn't be a condition of the permit, that would be, new information you could consider up until the date of deciding on the renewal. But with that in mind, I mean, I guess, council could issue a renewal and somebody draw an application, it wouldn't give you, certainty of an application.
Okay, Councillor Jurgensen and then Councillor Fast.
Okay, through the chair to Planner Martin, can we issue a TUP for any shorter than the 3-year period? To allow the applicant
like
some time for some, for the rezoning application to come forward?
Through the mayor, I mean, TUPs can be issued for a shorter period than the 3-year term. The renewal that's before you, you can decide to renew this TUP for the same term as was issued. Or you would reject it and you would invite an application that you could amend and consider for a shorter period of time.
Thank you.
Councillor Fast.
Thank you. I move this recommendation and I'm in favor of this recommendation, partly because this is more than a cidery, it's complex. This, to me, is a gene bank, a living gene bank of heritage apple varieties. It's like a museum. And for rezoning for a museum or for a living heritage, something that has to do with agriculture in the future and climate change and the ability of food in and food types through, to me, it's more like an old-fashioned field station or, like I said, a gene bank. And if a rezoning is going to be considered, and I went and spoke to these people, as I gather some others did as well. Having been involved in a little bit peripherally friendly relations with the people who had with the Rileys, I'm very familiar with the project of conserving the heritage apple varieties, and I think this is a wonderful service that Bowen Island can do for the future and for Canada and the Northwest. And so I think it's more complex than just a cidery. I think the cidery helps support the bigger project is my view for it. And that it's the bigger project is the one that I'm more interested in, and I would welcome a rezoning application. And I think the idea of looking far into the future for this, other heritage collections die when the people move on or die. And so this is a collection that has been collected from those previous folks. It's something very special. And so I'm in favor of renewing this temporary use permit to give the applicants more time to make their complicated, complex, or maybe not complex, but to make their plans and come forward with a rezoning application that won't require changes the next shorter period, which can also take council time. So I think, so I'm in favor, and I urge us all to think long-term, not temporary, about this temporary use permit. Give everybody more time.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Second round speakers, Councillor Jurgensen.
Just building on what Councillor Fast was saying, I think it's important to preserve the heritage orchard, but having said that, I think that it's important to have that built into the TUP if we are to issue a new TUP. So I will, I'm currently not in favor of renewing the TUP, but rather inviting a new application to buy some time to do a rezoning application. And then we can get this done once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen. Okay, multiple hands up. First time speakers, Councillor Saunders.
I had a 5-minute speech, but I won't bother with it. I'm just going to echo what Councillor Fast said. I fully support this based on pretty much the same grounds.
Thank you. Councillor Morse.
They've got several letters of support, and the business, it takes a while to get a business up and running. And if we need to renew the TUP, so they've got the time to put in a rezoning application. So, and I noticed the Vancouver Coastal Health provided comments that they had no concerns in the staff report, that comment. So that's why I seconded the motion, and I'm fully in favor of proceeding and renewing the TUP.
Thank you. The only comment I have is that just looking at the timeline here, that this these temporary use permits and rezoning now have the potentiality of stretching across 3 council terms. So it began last council term, we're into this council term, and it could be, given what we saw with another cidery on the island, be handed over to another council to make a final disposition decision. I'm curious whether it's possible to set the expiry of this permit to October 16th, 2026. If that's something that we can do as a council.
If council issues the renewal, it would be issued as of today's date for a 3-year terms would be.
And it's not possible to amend the term?
It's not possible to amend the term.
Okay.
Renew the permit as issued.
So this is November or December 2023.
Yeah.
It would then expire on December 2026. And so if they didn't do the rezoning and get it done in this council term, then they're sort of hung out to dry and have to start all over again.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I would ask that you be recognized first before speaking, Councillor Morse.
Sorry.
Councillor Wake.
I support the comments by Councillor Fast and Saunders and Morse. I think there's a lot of benefits to this. We certainly want to allow the voices of complaint, but it's clear to me that, especially with this conversation, that the applicant realizes a rezoning application is going to be required. And so I think if the business should carry on, the heritage protection is happening because the cidery is in existence. So I'm going to support the motion.
Councillor Getty, last comment, and then I'll call the motion.
In the previous TUP, I can't remember if we actually included it, but can we put in language requiring that, or giving notice that it would not be renewed? There's some suggestion in the last council that if after the TUP was granted, there was a renewal, and then there would be a reapplication, there could be a continuation of the process. And I just want to make sure that that is not a consideration.
Through the mayor to mayor and council, council can't fetter a future council decision. So if a new application is made for a TUP or for a rezoning, council can't be fettered by a prior council decision. So this TUP would run for 3 years. You know, if they apply for a rezoning, council would consider that on its merits and not can't have their hands tied by a previous council.
Supplemental?
Yep.
So in the previous TUP with respect to the address on Miller Road, there was a mention by Planner Burgess that section something or other of the land use bylaw or local government act did not allow for an extension of a renewal.
I believe the Island Community Planner was referring to 497, which says to renew a temporary use permit. Notice doesn't have to be given. It's to issue the temporary use permit for the first time. There's clear like notice requirements in the Local Government Act.
I'll call the question. So all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Audio now unmuted.
Councillor, so motion carries. Councillor Getty and Councillor Jurgensen opposed. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Item 8.5, on island compost facility preliminary design. We have the manager of environment here.
So I'll be
making very brief comments before
Yes.
we receive the report. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So
Audio now.
thank you, Mayor and Council. So you have before you a report about the current status of the on-island composting facility. And it was last with council at the beginning of this year, and council had approved some minor funding to do a deeper analysis on the implementation and the costs and the cost of implementation and the operating costs. And the manager of environment and parks planning has provided a fairly detailed report with the outcomes of that review and analysis. And but is not here today to be able to take those questions, but I'm pretty fluent with the application itself and the project itself. So if Mayor and Council wish to have questions, I can do my best to respond.
Thank you. And I would also anticipate that we'll see this again during the budget process.
That's right. And so today this is really about bringing Mayor and Council up to speed and in an open environment to the current status of the project. And this will come through the budget process. One of the considerations for Mayor and Council of concern is that there's over $1 million in provincial funding, as well as $100,000 funding from the Knickknack Nook for this project. And in order to take advantage of that $1 million of funding, there would need to be an early budgetary approval for the project earlier than the entire municipal budget to ensure that the project could complete within the deadline of March 2025.
Thank you. I'll look to council for council to move the recommendation, please. Councillor Fast.
I move that council receive the on-island composting facility preliminary design report dated November 27, 2023 for information.
Moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Getty. Any discussion? Councillor Fast?
Just briefly, that I'm delighted to see this onshoring of our important service. I think it would be good during the budget discussion to take the climate action grant funds and put it towards it, because there'll be tons of carbon currently that we emit by driving it to wherever it goes to, and from people going to the city to buy compost. So this would make it available on the island. I note page 7 of 9, the cost savings, payback period 13 years. I'm in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Audio.
And that carries unanimously. I'd like to make a motion that item 8.5A, the letter from the public, be referred to staff for comment when the on-island compost facility preliminary design returns to council for approval.
Okay.
Seconded by Councillor Fast. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Audio
And
now.
that,
Aye, in favor.
thank you, and that carries unanimously. Item 8.6, emergency repair of road access to Bowen Island Marina. We have our Director of Engineering here. I believe the report speaks for itself. If there's any comments you'd like to make, or just entertain questions from you.
Really just questions. It's, we're not looking for a resolution from council. It's for information.
Okay.
Expenditures that weren't anticipated, so.
Right.
That's the reason why.
Councillor Fast, then Councillor Wick.
Thank you. I saw the trees down there, and I looked down into it and I went, oh. Should we report those kinds of things, or do you guys do regular inspections when we see something that might be a problem?
We do inspection, on the skier structure itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that there is, it is probably overdue for an inspection. We had an inspection done last year, but it wasn't a structural inspection. It was for insurance purposes. And we were looking back at when the last structural inspection was done, and it was, so I think it was 2017 or 2018.
Okay, so next time I'll drop you an email. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wick, then Councillor Morse.
I was actually gonna make the recommendation, but if there's further questions, I can wait.
Well, it was just a clarifying question.
Yes.
I went back and had a look at the structural reports we've done before. They wouldn't have picked this up, a structural report on the dock itself, right?
Probably not. I mean, there's
two separate.
There's a wall that is next to the big concrete slab that you drive off on, and the wall, it's not really a structural wall, it was just retaining the soil behind it that had rotted out, and then material would wash out from
Audio
underneath
now unmuted.
the road where you drive into Bowen Island Marina, tell your friends.
So it's not part of the structure of the dock at all?
No, it's not part of the structure of the dock. It's right adjacent to it.
Councillor Wick.
Okay, I'll recommend that council receive for information this report explaining the emergency repairs required at the entrance to Bowen Island Marina.
Moved by Councillor Wick, seconded by Councillor Fast. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
That carries unanimously. 8.7, our CAO update. Over to you, Mr. Edwards. Thank you, Mr. Gray.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. So we had an updated project schedule for the community center project from our constructor, and they have sharpened their pencils and looked more diligently at all of the remaining tasks. And unfortunately, the new schedule does identify a completion date in mid to late April, which I believe to be a more realistic timeframe than what we were being provided with before. They're still want to try to compress that as much as possible, and so they're still trying to look to ways to complete sooner than that date. But when we look at the critical path of all of the dependent items, it's likely that it'll be around that time when we see final completion and handover of the project. And so the positive side to that is having gone through this updated schedule in detail with them last week, we can start to feel a little more confident about the time, and we can start to plan more firmly about our move and the other associated knock-on effects of the taking possession of that facility. And so it may be later than anticipated, but starting to become exciting because it's starting to become a little more real. So we'll keep you posted with that as things go. I see Councillor Wake itching to.
Councillor Wake.
Has there been any acknowledgement of planning the date and then not, and then having to extend it and extend it? We've had a number of extensions here. So has there been any identification of what went wrong with forecasting that? Have there been a bunch of things or some items that have come up that are completely unexpected?
There's I think it's a mixture of unknowns and then also trying to be optimistic in the planning. And so as with almost every project, especially on Bowen, the beginning had significant delays around earthworks in terms of getting to the proper elevations for beginning construction. And then I know there's been some challenges. I'm not trying to discredit any of the subtrades, but there's been some challenges with coordination. And in particular, that has to do with being on an island as well. And so that becomes challenging there. And then the other element which I spoke about is the sort of optimistic scheduling. And so I've just been very clear with the builder that I prefer a more conservative and realistic view than something that's optimistic and hopeful. And so that we've just gone through it with a little more robustness to the potential, the length of time it may take to complete certain things.
Thank you.
Just an additional community center question. Is there a point where we begin to become concerned about interruption of service to our recreation programs?
We're very fortunate that the Bowen Children's Center board and executive director and management team have been incredibly helpful working with us through this unknown and delays in enabling us to have extensions to our lease arrangement there to provide recreation services. So we're extremely grateful for that, as well as with the property owners here to extend our lease here. But, with certainty, we do have to go back to those owners and ask for further extensions. And it is entirely possible that could become problematic, but we'll have to cross that bridge if it comes to that. So I did want to touch base on where we're at with the development cost charges for the Snug Cove sewer system. And so staff have been digging in deep and developing the charge rates for the different types of users on the sewer system in Snug Cove. And there's effectively two different types of users. There's the residential users, which is a fairly straightforward calculation that you can apply to a per capita allocation. And so you can have different types of residential uses like detached single family or multifamily or seniors. And that we can fairly easily apply a per capita use rate. The more complicated user group is the commercial sector, or what we call the ICI, which is the industrial, commercial, institutional sectors. And so the general practice for DCCs for the ICI sector is a per square meter rate. And so that takes a little bit more analysis and data to come up with an equitable per square meter charge. And we're fairly close to having that per square meter charge finalized. And we just need to build the materials into a digestible format for the development sector to review, which is our next step in the process. Where in the hopefully early in the new year, we'll call a meeting with the development community in the Snug Cove area, those with interest in development, and to review those charge rates. And then we'll be bringing that to
council as well as the finance committee as well and the sewer committee for their review and consideration. And so we're hopeful that work will, that engagement work will begin in earnest in the new year. I'm really happy to report out on Emergency Operations Center training and exercise that we've been working on this fall. We did 2 full days of staff training on Emergency Operations Center protocols. And then we had a full day exercise in the new EOC at the fire hall. And it was a fantastic day of learning. And I think we're fortunate to have had a consultant who puts a tremendous amount of effort in creating a very realistic scenario. And the scenario was an interface fire, a fire along Cowan Point Road around the Forest Ridge area, cutting off the residents to the south in and around the golf course area from the remainder of the island. And the exercise itself incorporated about 40 plus people, and quite a number of those people weren't technically in the EOC. A number of them were in what's called a sim cell, which was in a separate room with headsets on, making phone calls, doing text messages, posting to social media, sending emails, really keeping the Emergency Operations Center room quite busy and active. And I think in a real world event, it would be even busier, we'd be getting even more calls. But ultimately, it was an excellent learning opportunity. A lot of really great learning occurred, and I was quite impressed with the entire team's ability to respond well to the event and to the situation. And as well as the consultant had nothing but positive feedback. And I think one of the best pieces of feedback was just the level of ease in which the team worked together and the willingness and ability for the planning area to talk with the operations and the information officer and working across sectors. The consultant was sharing that even in larger, more sophisticated EOCs that he's worked in, there's often that reluctance to get up out of your chair and go and talk to your colleagues. And so I think the advantage that we have is that we're quite a tight-knit team. And so he's pretty impressed to see that level of camaraderie and communication. A clear takeaway for us from that event was that a primary concern in such a real event could be staff fatigue, and we are a small team. And so, I was looking around the room and seeing, well, this is the majority of our team is here. And if this event were to continue through the night or for multiple days, we would be quickly burning out our staff. So that's something that we have to pay keen attention to. But otherwise, it was a fantastic event. I did want to touch base on 2 other things quickly. One is we did get a letter from Metro Vancouver Park staff in response to our most recent outreach to them, where we were indicating the response from the Islands Trust and indicating council's list of conditions as related to their application to the Cape Roger Curtis Park proposal. Effectively, their response was saying that they believe their application is in alignment with the OCP and is in alignment with the Islands Trust policy statements. And they respectfully request more details as to how they can achieve the concerns raised by the Islands Trust and how they can achieve the conditions. And they did also state that they believe that their application does address many of the concerns that have been identified and conditions that were identified, and that there were several of those would be outside of the scope of the project, requiring significant financial contributions from their level of government that they weren't prepared to make.
And they're essentially requesting greater specificity. We have not responded yet, but essentially the staff level response would be essentially indicating that we have been rather clear, and at this stage, we're not in a position to provide that specificity they're looking for. We can't speak on behalf of the Islands Trust, but that at the very least, we would anticipate that there'd be a consideration of an amendment to their application, particularly around the intensity of use that is contemplated in their application. So that might look like a reduction in the number of campsites, more concrete evidence of how they would manage increased traffic and volumes to and from the site, and some more concrete examples of how they would manage activities on the site. And we would be looking to them to come forward proactively with amendments to their application rather than with us specifying exactly what would be. And then last is just a quick note that we will be in winter break. And so as always, between Christmas and Boxing Day and the New Year, the municipal offices will be closed. And hopefully you won't find anybody here. Anyway, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Questions for the CAO on his update? On the regional parks piece, the one item that was flagged was the transportation report, that they were undertaking a peer review of their own transportation report. Have we heard anything back on that? Yet?
I have not heard anything back on that yet.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 10.1, reports of committees. 10.1 is the draft minutes of the Housing Advisory Committee held November 17th, 2023. There is a recommendation there. I did just want to comment. I did have an alternate recommendation put in there as well. Have a sense one way or the, or I don't have a preference one way or the other where it goes. The reason I have for the alternate recommendation is we've seen a lot of movement from the province on housing legislation recently. We did receive a letter, I believe, last month from the Ministry of Housing or Municipal Affairs letting us know that there would be some funding coming for some planning work relating to some of this. We don't know how much it is or what it's going to be. And in addition, we've also heard some strong rumors that there will be additional housing legislation coming down the pipes from the province. So the last couple of months have felt like a flurry of activity that we thought it was one bill. It's turned out to be three. We don't know what else is coming. And my only idea of caution here was perhaps we wanted to have the Housing Committee put this cluster zoning pilot project in context with have the opportunity to discuss the provincial legislation, and also perhaps buy us a little bit of time to know what the funding support is going to be for the ministry's housing plans and whether or not there's going to be any other legislation that may or may not affect us coming out of the ministry as well. So that alternate recommendation is just there in case there was a desire to have that conversation. And perhaps I will look to our members on the Housing Advisory Committee for some contextualization of the recommendation coming out of it.
There's a lot of work to be done here.
Right. You had that look on your face of, I don't know where to start eating this elephant.
Certainly, it would be great to get some funding from the province, and if we dive into it and then apply for the funding, I don't know how that looks. Right. So I think this, the thinking on this can continue, and probably at the housing at the committee level would be a good place for that to happen. And I think we need to certainly work with Planner Martin and see what the possibilities are, because it seems they're wide ranging. I don't know if you want to add to that, Councillor Morris.
Well, they just released on late Thursday a whole raft of regulations and everything. And one of the statements in the press release, which I haven't got the detail on, 51 million just for January 2024, 51 million is to be distributed to local governments to help meet new requirements that promote the province's housing density initiatives. But I haven't delved into the details of what, is that just going to be so much per head, or you haven't had your meeting yet? Yeah.
Planner Martin and I participated in a lengthy Zoom call with the ministry, multiple ministries today. They haven't identified what the allocation will be. It's not going to be an application-based allocation, but we don't know how much of that we'll be getting.
So
There's a lot of details that still need to be ironed out and a lot of questions that are being asked.
Maybe we should ask Ms. Benton if she has any comments.
Oh, I see our Housing Advisory Committee Chair is on screen. Any questions or comments from you, Ms. Benton? Or Chair Benton?
Hello. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My only comment would be to agree with Councillor Wake. I think let's just keep this rolling forward. I know the recommendation here is for multiple points. And it could be, I think what we proposed was sort of just the next steps, a couple of first steps, and then a check-in in early 2024. So in my mind, that's, maybe March or something, February. So I think we could get this pilot project rolling, put out an expression of interest, put together a timeline. And then I think during that time, either at least in parallel, if not jointly with this project, look at all of these announcements from the province. There's a lot of them. I think it's still early days for a lot of them. I've also had chats with Lisa Helps at the, whatever it's called, the Build BC or Housing BC. So I think there's early days. There's a lot of great programs coming, and I would prefer not to hold this project up, which has been in the works for a while, especially at the committee level. It'd be great to just get the ball rolling on it, and whatever council's comfortable with saying yes to for the next couple of months, and then we can come back with a check-in and we'll have more information and can also give an analysis of the provincial programs at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fast, then Councillor Jurgensen.
Thank you to the committee for all the great work on this, and I really think it's important. I also think there's other things that I would love to find a way to fold in as well, like protection of nature and groundwater recharge, nature being one of the main values of Bowen. Groundwater recharge, as we've heard earlier, things like that. And I also heard federal funding might be coming available for co-ops. And we have adjusted this, and we have, as a council, adopted, we've become part of this early adopter offsite housing. Maybe it's not feasible for Bowen, but maybe there are some things there that could help. And that was, I don't know if that was before November 17th. And I just, anyway, I've been seeing more about this in the Islands Trust agenda from last week, had a whole bunch of information as well. So I'd be happy to pass that along. But I just, things are changing quickly, and more things appear possible, and it's very exciting. So I'm in favor of either recommendation. I was looking at the second one, the alternate one, that we refer it back to the Housing Committee to consider alongside but I'll let one of the people from the Housing Committee make whichever recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Councillor Getty.
Could anybody recommend how to combine these two recommendations? Recommend a recommendation?
I've had a thought. Is I would perhaps like to see the original recommendation, but in the bullet points, be the second two. That a work plan and timeline for the project, which includes community engagement, come back from council, and that be reported back to council in early 2024 with an updated report, which will include a work plan timeline period. I think there's some considerations for staff time and resources that come in creating an expression of interest. as well as creating a supported application process for that. So I'd like perhaps the Housing Advisory Committee and the Planning Department to have a bit of a scoping process to let us know what that's going to take in terms of time and resources before we fully commit to a project like this.
So I had exactly the same thought.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify, which bullets are you talking about? I thought you said the first two. Are you meaning?
No, the last two. Yeah. Let's begin with create a work plan and then report back to council. To the CEO.
Well, and I almost wonder, putting into practice the new approach of using the strategic bucket is applicable here too, because this is not currently within the.
Excuse me, can we have quiet, what's complex matters up here?
It's not currently within the specified as a unique project within the strategic plan. Maybe I'm getting some funny looks, but I also want to recognize too, it's important to see how this integrates with the OCP work that is being considered too. So.
Right. Councilor Morris?
I thought providing more housing, diverse housing and affordable housing was clearly one of the key things we wanted to accomplish in our strategic plan.
With certainty, I'm sure it is, but when we just had our strategic planning exercise, when we're looking at like the specific projects that we were undertaking, I'm not sure that this was well articulated as.
And I guess the other thing I wanted to add is I think any work that we do here would contribute to the OCP review and update.
Councilor Getty, then Councilor Wake.
I think we have to balance. There's all of the items that we talked about in terms of housing is to not delay it too long in terms of keying up, lining up the OCP and some of the longer range. If we're going to look at the provincial legislation that's just been coming in as a potential delay, then that's short term as far as I'm concerned. And if we're talking about, delaying it or having it sit on the shelf or be considered with the OCP or with any other considerations, I think that there's got to be a balance in terms of keeping it alive, keeping the some good work happening on it, and at the same time, I don't want to line it up with the OCP. Although I know that the OCP is going to have a lot to say about this, but I'm thinking that this could potentially be the model that helps us develop the OCP. So I'd like to have some idea of what their scope is. I guess the work plan and timeline would be, and then we're going to have a better idea of how it fits in with all of the other work that we have to do.
Right.
But I do think we have to include in this and not avoid all the details in the provincial legislation that's coming down. So there was somehow separating those two out, and I don't think that is responsible or reasonable, and that has to be included in this work plan.
To the CEO for response, and then to Councilor Wake.
That makes a lot of sense, Councillor Getty. I do get worried about the EOI and starting to go out to the public with saying, we're open to this and give us your ideas, and we have to vet those. EOIs are not light pieces of work. And so I'm just conscious of the planning department's capacity. We seem to be loading up, and I want to just be really cognizant of what our actual capacity is.
Councilor Wake?
Well, I'm in agreement. I think we really need, this is going to be, as I said at the beginning, there's a lot of work here. And I think we need to get started. And I agree that we don't want to be offering a supported application process or an EOI. We're not ready for that, but that's exactly what this planning is leading to.
Okay.
As far as the OCP is concerned, this is going to be a really important part of the OCP right from the get-go. It's not like we're going to wait for the OCP and then decide what to do. This is going to help, as Councilor Getty said, it's going to help guide the OCP. So.
Councilor Fast?
Thank you. I'm looking at, I agree. I'm looking at our, and I'm speaking in favor of the first recommendation and the last two bullets, not the first two. I'm looking at our current strategic plan, and it does have facilitate creation of diverse and affordable housing in there. Not the budgeted part, just the bubbles. And I also recall from the previous official community plan that affordable housing and for diverse community was one of the top dominant themes, right up there with green oasis, I think we called it. And so I don't think we need to wait for the OCP. I think the current OCP tells us this. So I'm going to go ahead and move that council approve the cluster housing zoning pilot project as presented, and that council direct staff and the Housing Advisory Committee, HAC, to work together to create a work plan and a timeline for the project, which includes community engagement, and report back to council in early 2024 with an updated report, which will include a work plan and a timeline.
Okay, moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Wake. Just going to propose an amendment because we're not entirely clear on the housing zoning pilot project, what it is in its entirety, what its timeline is, and what its resource impacts are going to be. I'll move an amendment that we strike that first line, that council approve the cluster housing zoning pilot project as presented, and insert in that what's now the first bullet.
So that cluster housing zoning pilot project?
Yes, create a work plan and timeline for the cluster housing zoning pilot project.
Second, the amendment.
Amendment is seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries unanimously. Now we're back to the main motion as amended. Is there any further discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that carries unanimously. Thank you. With that, we are on to new business. An update to Council on Metro Vancouver business. It has been very quiet. It sounds like our CAO has more of an update than I do on Metro Vancouver business. However, the just some calendar notes. The board meeting for next week was canceled. But what is new next week is at 1 p.m. there will be a Mayor's Committee, so a Metro Vancouver Mayor's Committee meeting to discuss all of the housing legislation that's come out of the province. So I'm curious as to what the other mayors who are more affected might be feeling about that and the direction that Metro Vancouver as a regional body is going to be taking on that. There is a meeting of TransLink next Thursday morning, however, it's entirely in camera. And that is it for Metro Vancouver and TransLink Council business. Unless there's any questions, I will hand it over to our Islands trustees for an update on Islands Trust business.
Okay, I'm prepared for this one. We, in consultation with my colleague here, we met Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday last week in Victoria as a trust council, 26 trustees, a few of them online. And the meeting featured a bunch of things you can ask me later if you want. One of them was about the governance committee, adding to the governance committee, which Judy Getty chairs. For example, how to make trust council meetings more efficient. And but they've got a number of things on their plate. They were asking trustees for input. I won't go into the rest of that stuff. I'll just talk about the budget. Some of you may have seen that Bowen Island Municipality is proposed to go up by, it's only 22.9% increase for Bowen Island Municipality currently. Every year, we're about halfway through the budget cycle. Finance Committee of the Islands Trust has met twice on this so far. We saw a lot of business cases for new things. And usually it starts up at this kind of level and goes significantly as the budget process goes along and as staff talk to staff and all these kinds of Islands Trust staff talk to our municipal financial staff. But I'll say it is a little eyebrow raising, but one of these are things that Bowen contributes to. One of them is, for example, the big ticket items is a new GIS mapping, the online mapping systems, new staff, full-time employee in the mapping department. Not something that Bowen usually uses much of now. However, we have this formula that brings us into this part of it. And I will note that in the mapping part, Islands Trust pays for the ArcView software program, and there's many more users from Bowen Island Municipality than there are from Islands Trust. I don't know how the calculations come out, but it's not as simple as we don't use staff. They're staffed for mapping. We use their software licenses though. Anyway, I've got more details on that. We can talk more about that later. But that's one of the things, because Bowen contributes to the federation-wide work of Trust Council. And part of that includes the mapping currently. And we also contribute to that's one arm, the federation, and the other arm is the Islands Trust Conservancy. And they are also proposing one new Islands Trust Conservancy staff full-time equivalent for property management. As you know, the number of nature reserves and conservation covenants is climbing. Year after year, applications are coming in, and land is being protected, but it takes staff time to manage it properly. So those are the two big ticket items. Another one is a new office location for Salt Spring Island. This one I challenged because some of that funding is supposed to come out of surplus, money that was unspent from previous years that Bowen did contribute to. So I asked for fairness there and some kind of policy about when we've contributed money to surplus, or any group of citizens or islands have contributed to surplus, then it's going to a single planning function, which Bowen doesn't contribute to, that they come up with a policy to take us out of that. And apparently there was a memo drafted before the meeting. So we'll see what happens with that one. And then Councillor Getty challenged there was a few that got challenged. Another one was about our need to be excluded from the housing need reports that Islands Trust does. Anyway, some of these things, some of them were typo kinds of things, but still, that should bring the numbers down. More to follow. Financial planning committee meetings are open to the public through Zoom, as are all executive committee meetings. And anybody who's interested in this, stick around after our closed meeting. I'll show you where to find it all online. Or you can obviously watch the recordings when they're eventually posted. So I'll just stop there for now and invite everybody to have a look at the Chief Administrator, Julia Mobb's Head of Administration's report in the Trust Council agenda from last week for background, or let me know if you want a hand. And Trustee Getty may have things to add, I'm not sure.
If I may, one of the important, most interesting parts of this meeting, we had a joint session with the San Juan Council. So the archipelago that's south of the border, it's a continuation of all the Gulf Islands, and they have a completely different system. So the representation that they have changes with every census. And so they were getting into a problem with multiple representations with different islands that split in terms of how many representatives they could have and everything, as opposed to the trust that has not had any change. We're celebrating our 50th anniversary the next year, and we haven't had any change. One of those issues that was delegated to the governance committee was to try to sort out the issue of representation. So Salt Spring with 10,000 people has 2 representatives, and some of the other islands that have 800 people also have 2 representatives. So there's serious problem for Salt Spring. And try to see whether or not the governance committee can come up with other suggestions and different products. But the San Juan Council had a good idea for both the problems that they're having with ferries, and communities being told that there simply will not be any more ferries serving various islands, and that they have to cut back and they're cutting out routes. And them trying to do passenger ferries, and they were also speed on one particular environmental thing in terms of tire dust, they were calling it. And so there's a bunch of work that's come out of that we've shared around. So trying to think of things to do for the 50th anniversary. You got to be careful what you ask for with the governance committee in terms of getting recommendations from council. And we got overloaded this time, but and a lot of good discussions about the budget. So we're working on bringing that awful number down.
Any questions for the trustees? I suppose my only comment is I did read the 24.5% number, which is seems staggering when in context. The other local trust areas are pegged at 10.5 right now. So, that said, I do know that the numbers change as the process goes on, but it is, I think, concerning. I know that we're going to be having a committee of the whole for budget in the near future, so that might be the appropriate place to talk about a response or a commentary from council if it is needed. I can also liaise with our friend Chair Luckham as well to see what his thoughts are on the matter. But it is, when I look at the numbers from what we've seen, we did see a 2 increase in 2018. We actually saw a reduction in 2020. My question would be whether that could be spread out a little bit more evenly in a fund versus taking a 20% plus hit when all municipalities are experiencing that. And also, if there is going to be a case for delivering value and service to Bowen Island, I would like to hear that from the trust. I think that needs to happen. Whether representatives from staff want to come and let us know what the value for money is going to be. If there's going to be a 25% increase in taxes, I think that might be good to hear. So fast?
Just to note, it's already gone down to 22.9. But I have the amounts that we have been increased and decreased over the years. It's a calculation that's right in the Islands Trust Act. As I understand it, it has to happen year by year, but unless we open that all up. And that would be an interesting idea, because as far as I can tell, the last few years we've actually got more benefit than what we've paid for, according to the way they allocate things. So I'd be happy to go through the numbers with anybody who wants to look at them later. And staff are better at that than me, but I have been working on it through the years.
Councilor Morris?
There is a policy which sets out exactly how all the pieces are supposed to be carved up, and a requirement in our protocol agreement that they advise us with and send us that spreadsheet prior to the end of the year. So I don't know if our CFO has received anything yet.
I will ask.
Never got it for last year that I know of.
No, sorry. Councillor Morris is correct in that typically we're supposed to receive the budget numbers early on. Last year we didn't receive anything. There was no budget discussion. I had a direct one-on-one with their CAO to address our concern around that. And I was assured that that wouldn't happen again this year, but we have yet to receive anything.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councilor Fast.
One last comment is just that, as usual, they are racked with staff vacancies and illnesses. They're, well, anyway, I'll just stop. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to question period. So question period is an opportunity for members of the public to request clarification or ask a follow-up question related to an item discussed. Any members of the public online or in the room here who would like to ask a question?
I don't have to ask a question, but all I can say is I'm really glad that the groundwater survey from the groundwater report from the Islands Trust comes really in good time before the OCP review, so that it can consolidate some of the decisions that the public will show, so that it can reinforce the council in their decisions. And the GIS, it's going on, and that started it in 1992. I was part of that team that prepared the maps to start all that GIS bulk work. So it's just a foundation work, all I can say.
Thank you very much. To the corporate officer for anyone online that might like to speak. So seeing no further questions, I will look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Wake. Seconded by Councillor Saunders. Seeing no discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand. Say aye. Aye. And we